Good morning. Good morning. Today is Thursday, June 2nd, 2022, and I'm welcoming you to a land use meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County. It is an absolutely beautiful day today in Manatee County, and we're going to start this day the way we always do. We're going to start by honoring God and by honoring our great nation. So today, for the invocation, we have Shiraz Hassan from the Islamic Society of Sarasota, Bradenton. He will deliver the invocation, after which we'll have you keep standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our Army veteran and County Commissioner, Reggie Bellamy. So at this time, if you're able, please stand.
Let us pray. I begin in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Praise be to God, the Lord of the worlds. Almighty God, we ask you to bestow your grace and blessings upon this meeting. We ask you to guide the members of our board and all that participate in this meeting to do what is right and do that which pleases you. We ask you to strengthen and help them to work together as one team with humility, patience, perseverance, and inclusion as they work towards the goals and objectives. Almighty God, we are limited in our capabilities and we ask for your help. Give our leaders the knowledge and wisdom to execute their trust in the most effective way. O God, unite our hearts, mend our social relationships, and guide us to the path of peace. Make us grateful for your favors so that we may continue to receive them. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we're going to go to announcements and updates to the agenda. So we'll go to Mrs. Courtney DePaul for updates to the agenda. Ma'am?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. There was an updated memo published on June 1st, 2022, under advertised public hearings with presentation scheduled. Item number 5, PDMU-21-15, ZG, Cirque Italia, 53rd Avenue East Rezone, Invest Place LLC owner is the owner, PLN 2108-0028. It's a quasi-judicial item led by Marshall Robinson as the principal planner. There were public comments that were attached. And then item number 6 at 9 a.m. time certain, that's LDCT-22-02/Ordinance 22-26. Land Development Code Text Amendment, County Initiated for Agritourism. It's a legislative item, and that's led by Bill O'Shea, our principal planner, and public comments were attached. And then under the regular agenda, item number 8, Resolution R-22-094, denying application number PDR-21-07ZG. Public comments were attached, and all of the above changes are in the updated memo and have been attached to the agenda management system. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Whitmore will not be making it today, so we will be a board of 6. So, of course, all applicants know that legally they have a right to a full board for their hearing, and they can exercise that right asking for a continuance at any time. Let's move on to our 9 a.m. time certain. Ms. Shank, if you would please introduce the first agenda item.
Item number 6, LDC Text Amendment 2202, Ordinance 2226, LDC Text Amendment, County Initiated Agritourism. It's a legislative public hearing. Bill O'Shea is the principal planner, and Ms. Patraski is the LDC consultant here for presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Nicole Knapp, Comprehensive Planning Manager. And as Ms. Shank just explained, we're here for a Land Development Code Text Amendment regarding the topic of agritourism. This is the first of 2 hearings, so there'll be no action required today. We've been working with our consultant for over 6 months now, SM&E, and they are here today, and they're prepared to make a full presentation. So I will turn the presentation over to Pat Tayaski, and she also has Eric Roche with her.
Good morning. My name is Pat Tayaski. I'm a planner with SM&E, and we have a PowerPoint presentation. We can load it. Thank you. All right, so basically what I'm going to cover with this PowerPoint is the scope of the project, what we were hired to do, the schedule, some background on agritourism activities, a peer review analysis that we did, And then we're going to get into the actual proposed amendments and then any questions that you may have. In terms of the scope, so when we were hired to take on this project, the instructions were to, number one, do a best practices research, just go around the state, see if anybody else is addressing agritourism in their land development codes. Then to draft amendments to the LDC if we deemed that it would be necessary. At the time, we didn't know if we could do standards or not, or what we would need to do in terms of LDC amendments. Then to hold a workshop to get some public input, and then to do commissioner briefings and take the item through adoption hearings. In terms of the schedule, like Nicole mentioned, we've been working on this for several months, but in the past few months, in April, we had a workshop with the planning task force. We had about 15 people attend. It was a virtual meeting. Then we had a planning commission hearing on May 12th, and then we had briefings last week. So the plan for the adoption hearings is today first reading, and then June 16 would be the second reading. So in terms of the background, so going back in time, the first time that we saw the word agritourism added to the state statutes was in 2007. And basically it was to allow farmers to open up their farms to visitors, to provide for additional income. There were many amendments since then. One of them was to address liability, requiring that the operators of agritourism activities needed to post a sign on the property saying that they were not liable for anything that could happen on their properties. Later, the statute was amended again to prohibit local governments from enacting or enforcing regulations to prevent agritourism. So that was very clear. Nobody could adopt any rules that would prevent them from having an agritourism activity. Now later on that was not mine.
It's like an episode of the Golden Girls. Hold on just a second.
So later on, the statute was amended again to say that even though local governments could not enact or enforce regulations, they needed to address concerns regarding substantial off-site impacts. So whatever happened on the site was not of the local jurisdiction's concern, but if it had an impact beyond the site boundaries, a substantial impact, that would be something that they could address. Later on, there were some other amendments. There was one to include a language that allowed civic and ceremonial activities. That's when weddings became a permitted activity. And then just most recently, there was a provision regarding new buildings, and I'll talk about that one in a few minutes. So going back to the very beginning, so it's the Florida Right to Farm Act. That's where, the statutes address agriculture, the importance of it in our state. And basically the purpose of that act is to protect reasonable agricultural and complementary agritourism activities conducted on farmland from nuisance suits or similar lawsuits. So it was stated that whether it's agriculture or agritourism, they were protected from these types of lawsuits. Now, people ask, okay, so what is agritourism? So there is a definition in the state statutes, and basically it's any agricultural related activity consistent with a bona fide farm, livestock operation, or ranch, or in a working forest, which allows members of the general public for recreational, entertainment, or educational purposes to view or enjoy activities that may include farming, ranching, historical, cultural, civic, ceremonial, training, and exhibition, or harvest your own activities and attractions. Now, something important in this definition, it says an agritourism activity does not include the construction of new or additional structures or facilities intended primarily to house, shelter, transport, or otherwise accommodate members of the general public. So if you have an agricultural land and you build a structure or build some facilities to accommodate the public, you're no longer an agritourism activity. Another important part of the statutes is this one. This is the specific provision that says that a local government may not adopt or enforce a local ordinance, regulation, rule, or policy that prohibits, restricts, regulates, or otherwise limits an agritourism activity. But then the next sentence was the one that was added later on, saying that that does not limit the powers and duties of local governments to address substantial off-site impacts. Many people ask, what does substantial mean? It's not defined in the statutes, so that's something that we know for sure. Now, the latest amendment had to do with buildings, and there was language added saying that an agricultural classification would not be revoked only because of non-residential farm buildings, structures, or facilities are built. So if somebody has a farm operation, they have an agritourism activity, they want to come in and build a stable, they cannot be denied, their classification. So again, it focuses on non-residential farm buildings. In terms of the peer review, so we looked at 11 counties around Florida, and most of them didn't even address the word agritourism in their codes. We only found 3 of them that mentioned the word: Collier County, Lee County, and Osceola County. So we went in to see how they regulate agritourism. So Lee County, they adopted the same definition that we saw in the statutes, and they require a special event permit for any activity that would include 1,000 people or more per day. Collier County, they require a conditional use, which is the equivalent to the special permit in Manatee County. But when you read the ordinance, you can see that it was very geared towards the off-road driving operations. And then for Osceola County, same thing. It was very specific standards that seemed to address glamping. That was the impression that we got from the language. But again, the vast majority of them, of the counties that we looked at, didn't even mention agritourism in their codes. So in terms of what we're recommending, so the main focus is to review substantial off-site impacts. We're not going into a site plan trying to review what's happening on the operation. We're just trying to figure out how do we review, how do we assess those substantial off-site impacts. So when we think about agritourism, we can all agree that the first thing that comes to mind is the you-pick operation. You go pick your own strawberries, blueberries, oranges. We've seen that forever and ever, and we are not trying to limit that. We're not trying to have additional requirements, permitting, or anything for those operations. But the thing that we have seen more recently is where the agritourism activity involves thousands of people that may show up in one day. Again, what happens on the site, it's not really something we can deal with, but we have to think, how would that impact the rest of the county, the immediate neighborhood, the other agriculture owners? So when we think about the U-Pick site, you can drive by it every single day and may not even notice, because maybe it's just a sign that you see on the property. But when you think about an event that involves thousands of people, you know that you're going to have traffic impacts. You know that there may be some safety issues. You know that it's going to go beyond their boundaries. So that's what we want to focus on. So when we think about impacts, for any other project that may go through the county, we think about crowds, we think about traffic, the environment. What is this going to do to the wetlands that are connected to other wetlands in the area? What is that going to do to the health and safety of the citizens? And normally for other uses, we think of noise and odors, but because this is related to agriculture, those are 2 things that we can forget about even thinking that we can regulate. So for those 2, we just don't even consider them. So we want to focus on just the first 4. So when we started thinking about, what would make a difference in terms of the regular U-Pick type of operation or the one that is more intensive, when do we want to see them? When do we want to review them? We thought maybe it's related to traffic generation. And we thought, but why require all these people to go through a traffic study just to know if they need to apply? So let's just base it on population, just like Lee County did. We came up with this number. It's borrowed from one of the examples that we reviewed. It doesn't have a substantial analysis of why 1,000, why not 1,500, why not 2,000. It's just a number that we felt that in terms of traffic would relate to activity that we would want to take a look before it is approved. So in terms of how we could review an operation that is all of a sudden going to bring 1,000 people per day to a site, we have a process in place in Manatee County that is called the special permit review. So when you want to do any type of use in the county, you go to the Land Development Code. There is a chart that lists all the possible uses, and it tells you which districts you can operate that use. And then under each district, it will let you know if it is permitted, meaning you don't have to go through any type of hearing or public review. You just go get your plans approved and a permit. Or some uses require special permit. Why would those uses require special permit? It's explained in the definition. It says a special permit use, it's a use that is deemed to be generally compatible with the other land uses permitted in a zoning district. However, because of their unique characteristics or their potential impacts on the surrounding neighborhood and the county as a whole, those uses are subject to individual review for location, design, configuration, operation. So we felt that this definition really fit the agritourism activities to a T. So whenever a special permit is considered by the county, basically it goes to the hearing officer. The hearing officer is the approving authority for special use permits or special permits. So normally they go to section 316.6 of the code, and it says whenever you're reviewing a special permit application, you have to make sure it meets these criteria, A through H. And when you look at all of them one by one, it really makes sense to use that process for agritourism. It's saying things like, is this consistent with the comprehensive plan? Is this operation not going to be detrimental to the surrounding area? So some of them may go into specifics of site design. So those provisions would not be applicable to agritourism. But in general, the criteria seem like the right fit for this type of application. So in summary, what are we trying to do? So number one, we want to add the definition of agritourism to the Land Development Code in case anybody comes in and says, okay, I have this operation, can I do it in the county? Well, let's see if it meets the definition. And the definition reads the same as the state statute, so we would be consistent with that. Number two, adding agritourism as one of the uses permitted in the county, and noting that there would be special permit uses in the 2 ag districts. So people know, okay, I cannot do in a residential district, I cannot do this in any other districts, but in agricultural districts. Number three, we would add a provision to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the chapter where we have special requirements for certain uses. So we have a whole section for agriculture, and we would be adding a provision D that deals specifically with agritourism activities. Basically, the first sentence would say, if you plan to take less than 1,000 people per day, don't worry about it, you don't have to do anything. If you plan to have attendance of 1,000 or more, you have to meet this section and go through special permit. And then the last provision here has to do with the fact that all other special permits have expiration if you do not file a site plan with the county. But in this case, we're saying we're not going to use that provision. It would be up to the hearing officer to determine if this special permit should be forever or if they need to come back in a year or whatever time frame they want to use. In terms of the provisions in 531, and Nicole, could I borrow your, thank you. I'm going to use the overhead. So on this page, it's a little bit small. I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit, but basically it has several provisions that they would have to meet. Some examples. Number one, it says that you have to have access from a paved road. Now remember, this is not the U-Pick operation. This is the one that's going to have 1,000 people or more. So we're saying you should at least have a paved road. A site plan is going to have to be submitted. We're not talking about an engineer type of site plan. It's just a conceptual plan that shows us that you are going to be able to put all your cars on your site, that you're not going to have any off-site parking, and most importantly, that your emergency vehicles are going to be able to come in and out to do their job the way it's supposed to be. We don't want it to get stuck with all the people trying to get in or get stuck by some type of stage or activity going on, so that was something important to us. Then again, some other agencies may have a say on this. We're not saying that they have to get a permit from FDOT or from DEP, but we're saying that if those agencies have anything to do with this application, we would like to see what they said. We want to know that if the FDOT gave them some recommendations, we want to see what those are. And then the posting of the property, which is required by the statutes in terms of liability. And then, let's see, what else? Molestation of wildlife, that's something that is also a statutory requirement. And then the one about not being able to build additional buildings to house the public came from the statutes. And then the very last part talks about, so when the hearing officer is reviewing the special use permit, remember we mentioned that we had criteria from A through H. In this section, we're saying, yeah, use that criteria, but when you go to C, D, and G, remember, we're only looking at off-site impacts. Don't get boggled down by, oh, you're going to have to provide a buffer, or, oh, you're going to have to keep your noise down. No, just make sure that we're talking about substantial off-site impact. So that's specific instruction to the hearing officer to do that. And that's, in general, what the amendments that we're proposing are. And with that, I would just like to open it up for questions, if you have any questions from us or staff.
Thank you, ma'am. The order of the board is Cruz, Baugh, Serbia. Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, was there a precursor to us doing this? I mean, I know that the state brought up agritourism, what was it, 2 sessions ago? But per your presentation, most counties haven't implemented anything related to this, so clearly it's not a state mandated. Like, we get things at times where the state, like perils of flood, we have to put that in at some point. This doesn't seem like we have to, it seems like we want to. What led us to say, hey, let's revamp this and add this definition?
Can we go back to the PowerPoint for 1 second? I would like to go to a slide. Go back. So again, it is not required by the state that you do anything about it. But when we looked at this, the second sentence that was highlighted here, the bottom one, it says, looking at the previous one says you cannot adopt any regulations that would limit them or restrict them. So we understand that. But the last sentence says, this subsection does not limit the powers and duties of a local government to address substantial off-site impact. So many times we are reactive. Many times, some agencies may wait until there is an accident to put a traffic light. We want to do this before it becomes a problem. We want to do this so that staff has the tools to address what could happen in the future. It is not required. We're trying to be proactive rather than reactive. We're trying to translate that last sentence into how is the county going to review those substantial off-site impacts.
All right, and approximately, you may not know this off the top of your head, but approximately how many agritourism, how many events on A and A1 properties in Manatee County traditionally have over 1,000 people per day?
Yeah,
Other than maybe
that.
Hunsader and a medieval fair.
Yeah, we wouldn't know that, no.
We don't regulate them now, so we have nothing in place, and so we have no idea. I think
Understood,
we're not
but
looking
part
for
of
them.
this, part of it, we would know. If you have over 1,000 people a day, somebody would have called in and complained. And if nobody called in and complained, then it's probably not a problem in the first place. So if you don't know, that probably means that this is probably not really necessary, because people will complain if there's like 15 people at somebody's house. If 1,000 people are showing up on the parcel next to them and nobody called in, so we don't know, probably wasn't causing as much off-site impact as people would have you believe. So that's telling in and of itself. I mean, the way I look at this, it seems like we're trying to create regulation where regulation almost isn't needed and already exists. I mean, all of this property is on roads that, for the most part, aren't really even our roads in terms of substantial, all the big problems. And DOT would certainly take care of it for us if they were causing meaningful problems. And honestly, some of these regulations aren't off-site. Like we're requiring them to give us a site plan. What does that have to do with off-site? That's not off-site. That just seems like we're trying to butt into people's business. I mean, we sit up here all day long talking about how you can't have us stop developers because people who own farms have to do something and make profit. And now they're trying to do something to make profit by hosting weddings or having a festival. We're like, well, we're just make it more difficult for you. It's like, fine, I'm going to sell it over to to this developer over here and start putting up houses and apartment complexes instead. I mean, these are people trying to maintain open space and agricultural land in Manatee County, and if they have to make a few bucks to make ends meet, then we're trying to overregulate it. I think a lot of these regulations already exist. If it's too loud, we have noise ordinances. If it's too crowded, you have DOT that's going to say, hey, you're tying up our roads. If they're, we have fire marshal laws. We already have restrictions in terms of development. We already have it where you can't just go in and slap up houses on a piece of land without permits and so forth. All of this stuff gets taken care of in its own right. We just seem like we're trying to force people to get special permits so we can oversee and monitor what people do on their own private property at a time where we should be encouraging people to do these kind of things on their property. I'm not a big fan of this at all. It just seems like we're cobbling together additional regulations for the very people that we want to encourage to do things like this and maintain their own property. So that's just my opinion, but I think this doesn't make sense to me, honestly, if it's not required by the state, and it doesn't appear like it is. But I do appreciate the presentation. It was very informative, and I did really like the information, but I'm just not a fan of adding undue regulation above and beyond what we already have and can already take care of the important things within this without adding more layers to it.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Amazingly enough, some of the things that I was going to say, Commissioner Cruz just said. But I do have a couple of questions. Were there any meetings
We had a
with any of our farmers about all this?
We only had the planning task force workshop, which is open to the public, and we had one representative that was, that spoke during the meeting. That, from what she said, she had or knew people who had agritourism operations, and then we heard from some attorneys who represented some of those agritourism operators.
I bet you
That was
did.
it.
Let me ask you this. Was there any consideration given to these farmers and in the rural areas about, how they're doing financially with everything that we're seeing in the country today? It's just added to it with inflation and so forth. Any idea or any thought process put to how this might be hurting them if we get overregulated?
No, and the part about it that we did consider was we didn't want to regulate the small type of operation, the ones that you see in every county in Florida. We're not trying to address those. We're trying to address the larger operations, the 1,000 people and more.
Well, the reason I'm asking these questions is because, I had the rural area out east until the redistricting. So I'm very familiar. I represented that area for 9 years. And we only have two that I'm aware of that was in my district, and that was out in Mayaca, it was Hunsader, and then Dakin, that's not really, I don't think that's 1,000 people a day. And then the other one is the Medieval Fair that just had their first event this past year, which was a fiasco, which is the reason I think we're seeing this today come forward. And I understand that we want to try and regulate things so that it's the best it can be, but I am concerned about the overregulation and the bureaucracy that I'm seeing in this. This is just not, this is not how I want our government to be. I don't feel like that we need to overregulate our citizens, particularly those who have always pretty much struggled. The chairman, I heard him mention Dakin. They don't have 1,000 people a day that comes to their events. I wish they did. I really wish they did. And I certainly wouldn't want to do anything to hinder that in any way. So I'm a little concerned about how this has been brought about. I think it's a little bit more involved than what it needs to be, which I'm not surprised. When you bring in a consultant, they look at everything. I understand that. But I think it's just a little bit more than really what we need in Manatee County at this point. I also know that almost every event, maybe there's some in the parish area that I'm not familiar with. I don't know if there's any rural events in parish. I'm not sure about that. But the problem is, the ones that I am familiar with are all on state roads. So that means that a lot of it's already regulated by DOT. Could we work closer with DOT? I'm telling you, yes, we can, because I know this because of the medieval festival that we had. And I know that Hunsader, on 675, same thing. I mean, they do get big crowds. So I'm a little, I just need more. I just don't see why we need to get so over rambunctious on this. So maybe something will come up that will change my mind, but at this point, I think it's a little much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Serbia.
May I add one point really quickly? Do you mind?
Mrs. Clay, or Mrs. Clay. Sorry, I'm reading my board
Clay.
instead of
Oh, sorry.
Mrs. DePaul. Mrs. DePaul.
So just to the point, I did want to mention one thing that we didn't have in the presentation because it had come up in the recent legislative updates that takes effect on July 1st, correct? Was it used to say that it was a secondary revenue stream, that agritourism has to be a secondary revenue stream. So the word secondary in this new legislative update was crossed out. So now they do acknowledge, so I just wanted to mention that it is important to note that as well, that now they do recognize it as it could be your primary revenue stream is agritourism. So.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Serbia.
Thank you, Courtney. I think that's a very good point. So that I understand, this is not deliberation, because we've heard a lot of deliberation. This is questions only. Is that correct? Okay. So here are my questions. Is this only allowed in the A, general agricultural? Are we talking just about A, not A1?
In both, A and A1.
A and A1.
Yes.
So in the suburban agricultural zoning district, you're saying that someone could apply for a 1,000-person concert in the A1 zoning district?
Yes. Yes, they would, and both would be treated the same way with the special permit.
And those are 1 acre lots. 1 acre, you could have a 1,000-person concert.
And that's something that I.
Okay. And so it's not just the AGR future land use category then either. It's UF3. Future land use categories would not even be a factor, or are they?
It's just the zoning.
Just the zoning.
Just the zoning, yeah.
Okay. You said that you want to know what FDOT says. Would that be in the form of a pre-app, or would the county be requiring a permit from FDOT?
One of the provisions states that the applicant would have to provide information, either a letter or the permit or whatever they got from any of the other agencies. So if FDOT requires them to do some type of traffic management, that way the county would know what it is that FDOT was asking for.
Okay. And I think I heard you say that the hearing officer could approve a use like this forever, in perpetuity.
Yes. Because basically, when you get a special permit for anything else, you have 1 year to file your site plan. And once your site plan is approved, you can build and you have your special permit until, the use ceases to exist. So in this case, because there is not that requirement for a site plan approval, the formal site plan approval, then we had to put a provision there. So what happens if they never submit a site plan? Because the only site plan that we're requiring is that bubble plan that they submit as part of the special permit.
What if somebody was having an event with 900 people, so they didn't have to get this type of permit? Would they need a temporary use permit?
No, they don't need anything.
So if you're
They're
zoned
permitted.
A1 and you want to have 900 people,
You don't need to do anything.
999 people come, you don't need anything. Is that what I'm hearing?
Doesn't a tent require a temporary use permit if a tent is over a certain size?
That's correct, but with agritourism, they'll also be exempt from going through any formal process unless some aspect of the event would require a tent.
Would something then, any sort of event, be classified as agritourism if you had A1 or A zoning? Is that what this will also do? That we won't have different classifications anymore? It'll just be agritourism?
What do you mean by different
Well, if
classifications?
somebody was doing a concert,
Oh,
or
yeah.
somebody was doing a wedding, I guess a wedding, even with 1,000 people, you wouldn't need a temporary use permit.
If it is a wedding, a concert, even you pick, if you expect 1,000 people or more, you would need to go through that special permit
Okay.
review.
Okay, thank you.
It's just that 1,000 people that would make the difference. The type of agritourism wouldn't make a difference.
Okay, thank you.
And just to also clarify, the reason why we picked 1,000 people, because we had a few different options that we looked at. Vehicles, we believed that 1,000 people would be the easiest thing to regulate and to enforce, because number of vehicles, you have to stick someone out there that's counting vehicles all day. A number of people you could look at an attendee list or ticket sales. So that's why we decided to go with 1,000 people. So just to give
And
an
could I
explanation on
mention
it.
something else there? So, the numbers. So what if you have 999, you don't need to, apply? What if you don't apply and you're lucky enough that 1,500 people show up? Then at that point, you need to do, go through the process to make sure that you can continue operating that agritourism activity. What if you get approved for 1,000 and then all of a sudden you have, 10,000? The county could bring them back for reassessment of it. If it gets out of hand, if they break the approval of that special permit, if they don't comply with that approval, they would have to come back.
Okay, thank you, very helpful.
Okay, no one else is on the board. Let's move into citizen comment. I do have one card, Kevin Hennessy, an attorney for Hunsader Farms. So, sir, as you come forward, I'll sort of give the proper protocol for all citizen comment. If you're coming forward to speak, you'll be speaking on this specific agenda item. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and when you start, please start by stating your first, your last name, and your county of residence. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for your opportunity. Kevin Hennessy, Lewis, Longman, and Walker. I'm actually here on behalf of two entities. I would hope I could get more time because of that, but I don't know how your rules apply to that. But Hunsader Farms, and I'm also here on Mulroney Farms. And I'd love an opportunity, Ms. Baugh, to separately talk to you about how I feel that that applicant has been unfairly maligned and caught up in what was a problem that really was beyond his responsibility. But I have limited time, so I can't get into that now. But I do agree with everything else you said. I agree with everything Commissioner Cruz said, and I agree with everything Commissioner Servia said. I think you all have really identified that you have a regulation here in search of a problem, and really a regulation that's going to create more problems than it solves. It's important for you to take note, as indicated by the presenters. Nobody's doing this. Why is nobody doing this? Because the state regulates it. The state is promoting agritourism, and you should be promoting agritourism. And in fact, it's in your comprehensive plan to promote the property rights of your citizens. And that's why your planning commission rejected this and did not recommend it. And this is not coming to you here today with a recommendation of your planning commission. Just the opposite. They're concerned about the overburdenedness. They're concerned about the vagueness. They're concerned about the complications. I didn't even think about what Commissioner Servia brought up and what you were getting in terms of the answer. 999 people, you don't have to apply, but then they count at the door and they see 2 more come in and now you're in violation? I mean, that's craziness. I think the confusion that's coming about here is you got the 1,000 number from another jurisdiction, which was Lee County. But what they were doing was not a special use permit, they were using an event permit. And you're already doing that. Okay, these events, when you know you have a specific event that's going to be a large number of people that needs tents, somebody's coming in here and they're getting their tent permits. Okay, these events, if they need tents, they're coming in and getting a tent permit. You have regulations, you have code enforcement, you have all of these things on the books to deal with actual complaints. You go out there if you have a complaint and you verify if the complaint is valid. You don't need these regulations. Hunsader Farms has been operating since the 70s. Okay, their U-Pick operations actually generate more than 1,000 people a day at times. They don't know which day. They're going to get a special use permit for the U-Pick. But they've also been a part of this community for decades. Okay, you're not just beaches. Okay, agritourism. I don't know about you. I lived here for 10 years and brought my kids to Hunsader Farms every year for their fall festival. okay? It was.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. I do have a letter to hand to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak on this specific event? Anyone that did not, or specific item? Anyone who did not fill out a card? Okay, seeing no one, we'll go to the phone then. This is legislative. We'll go to the phone. Has anyone called in to speak on this item?
Thank you.
No, sir.
Okay, no callers, so I'm going to close public comment, and we will go to Commissioner deliberation. The order of the board is Servia, Satcher, Cruz, Van Ostenbridge. Commissioner Servia.
Okay, so nobody likes overregulation. You know, that's something that everyone's going to stand up here and say over and over again. Nobody wants unnecessary regulation. But when I'm looking at the zoning map right now, I've pulled it up. So A1 zoning, that gives me a little bit of heartburn that if we don't do this, if we don't regulate agritourism, then anyone can have large events on A1 zoning. Let me tell you where that is. On the north side of State Road 70 at 37th Street East. All along 44th Avenue from just east of 30th Street East, way west of Morgan Johnson Road. I mean, these are areas that are not out east or something that I think most of us would consider agricultural lands. These are areas that are suburban agriculture. They're smaller lots. They're primarily residential. And so I don't know, I'm kind of that long-term thinker. I think about what happens at the very end. So if someone had a big concert event out on one of these properties in the A1 zoning district, I can imagine the phone calls we would be getting at code enforcement on the weekends. Oh my goodness, and rightly so. So I'm concerned about protecting quality of life for neighborhoods. That's always where I am. You know, I've gone to Hunt Saders for years. It's way out in the country. It's on a state road. These are all things that other commissioners brought up, not really an issue. But when you're talking about A1 property, here's some more A1 property. Right along US 301, between the new 44th Avenue East and north of State Road 70. Big chunk of A1 property. Guess what wraps all around it? Single-family residential. I wish we were just talking about ag property, general agricultural property. And the fact that we're not going to regulate noise, okay, so outside of traffic and speeding car problems that I hear about every single day, the second biggest topic is noise. So what's going to happen if we're saying we're not going to regulate noise with these agritourism events in the A1 zone? And granting anything forever is not a good idea. I am a lifetime Floridian. I have seen Florida change dramatically. So it's hard to imagine what it will look like in even 10 years. But granting something forever is never a good idea. Those are my comments. I don't like overregulation either, but I do like protecting neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Satcher, you're next on the board, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From what I can gather, bringing this here today, when the state legislature is saying specifically you can't regulate something, and here we are bringing forward a regulation, I would assume this is born out of frustration over the events with the medieval fair in Mayaca. And I feel that angst. I mean, you know, it sounds like, and I think because of the core beliefs of a lot of people on this board, that we're not looking to create regulation from thin air, and we're not trying to, and we definitely don't want to be shutting down somebody like Hunsader or Mixon or, you know, these great organizations. Sounds to me that because of that, I don't think this regulation's ever going to, you know, pass this board. But I don't think it's because of any great decisions from some, from an attorney. I think it's in spite of. A lot of people, because when you say the state is saying not to regulate agritourism, and somehow, this group of a ton of people said, oh, we're going to be agritourism at the medieval fair, and we all, to me, that doesn't pass the smell test. And I would have, let me say, if that business had come before us and asked for a permit, asked for zoning, whatever they needed, I would have passed it. I would have passed it even, because where it was and the surrounding areas, the distance between, I would have voted in favor of it because I feel like it was a right thing if they own the property to be able to do that. But there was a lot of frustration because nobody ever asked, and there was all kinds of things going up on that property, all kinds of plans being made, without going through any process whatsoever, and then leaving us or the county in a tough spot because it was anyway, I won't go too much more into it, but I'll just say I'm not going to pass, or I won't be voting in favor of this much regulation on something when we're specifically asked not to by the state legislature. It seems like we are asking them to, in their next session, include that this includes 1,000 people or more, because that's their intent. Their intent is let farmers try to make a living on their land, keeping their land open instead of it being developed, for people that want to do that. And so I think we're going to be going against that, and I think we put ourselves in a bad position if we were to pass this. So I won't be voting in favor of it, but it's not because of any great decisions made by some high-class attorney that to me came pretty close to abusing the system. Thank you.
Sure, he appreciates the plug as a high-class attorney. Can't hurt business. The order of the board is Cruz, Baugh, and Van Ostenbridge. Commissioner Cruz.
It's in spite of you, not because of you. No, I'll be brief because I spoke earlier when I wasn't supposed to be deliberating. This is regulations for absolutely no reason. We already have the regulations that are relevant here. If someone's putting something onto a small piece of A1 land next to other residents, we've got noise, we've got issues. You can't put up tents, you can't build buildings. We've got that in the books. We don't need to reiterate it a second time for the 0 times this has ever happened on an A1 property. The only 2 instances, like we've said, is Hunsader and the Medieval Fair. Both those go off, Hunsader every year. And Medieval Fair went off last year. There was a lot of concern about it. We got 0 calls about it. I mean, there was a ton of people there, and everything went smooth. Everything was fine. That's how people operate. I don't understand why we're adding regulation, especially as Commissioner Satcher said. We're specifically being asked not to. There's no way I agree with this. I don't think the collective majority as board does. We can have a second hearing because we're required to, but my guess is you can probably put it on consent because I don't think it's going anywhere on the 16th. But I think we're doing a great job now. I think we're regulating people as they need to be regulated, no more, no less, probably more than less. But this just doesn't make sense to me. This, like it was pointed out, this is a solution to a problem we don't have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our job today in looking at this item is to say whether or not, as it is, we want it to move forward, or does it need to go back to the drawing board? I think it needs to go back to the drawing board. Hunsader, it's not way out there anymore, Commissioner Servia. If you go out to Hunsaders today, you will see that there's homes being built probably within 5 miles of Hunsaders. It's really, the area is really changing. And the problem that I have truly with this is that we have infringed upon our rural areas already. And I feel like that, they're a little frustrated. I think that they feel like that, they don't know where it's going to stop. So I think that, to overregulate them at this point is a problem. I do believe that if we're talking about something in town, then it is something that we need to take a closer look at. But when you say ag, we do have some ag properties that are not out east. We do. And we probably should look at those. That goes without saying. But, we need to ease up on the ag properties out east. We don't need to run them out of business, so to speak. We need to be helping them, not hindering them. My job, I see it as we are to be helpful, not create hardships for any business that's trying to make a go, especially in today's economy. It's very, very tough. I mean, I have a business that's not ag, and it's getting tougher by the day. So I think this needs to go back to the drawing board. Mr. Chair, when you're ready, I'll be happy to make that motion.
So, yes, ma'am. Just as I'm going to weigh in here, because I haven't yet, and just state that I'm on board with the exception of most of Commissioner Servia's comments, I'm on board with most of what's been said. I'm a small government conservative. I don't want to see redundant regulation. I don't want to expand the reach of government when it isn't necessary to do so. But at the same time, I do understand that there are some A1 properties that are in urban settings or certainly in suburban settings that should be addressed later. So my recommendation, Commissioner Ball, would be to make a motion to continue this and give staff some direction to come back to us with more of a narrow focus, a much more narrow focused ordinance. So that would be my recommendation. Dr. Hopes, would you like to weigh in on that?
I would, Mr. Chair. Based on the conversations, I think what we will do is we'll come back and identify all those areas that would apply because we do require event permits and things like that, which may be beneficial to the board to realize that we probably do have adequate regulations in place. And if we identify any narrow gaps, which may deal with some of the suburban areas, we can discuss that further.
Okay, thank you. And just for some direction, I'm only thinking of small A1 zone parcels. I mean, at Cortez Road and 75th Street, Manatee Fruit Farms owns well over 1,000 acres there. I would not have a problem with that. The infrastructure is much better suited there for an event than it is in Mayaca. So I'm only thinking of these smaller parcels that are in suburban settings. So the order of the board now is Servia and Bellamy. Commissioner Servia.
Thank you. And I love what Commissioner Baugh said because Hunsaders has changed. It's no longer way out east, and that's why I said don't do anything forever because things change quickly. And when you write zoning regulations, it's difficult because you can't say, oh, except for A1 zoning in this area, you can't do it, but in this area you can. It becomes a little difficult, and you get into, I think, a conditional use permit situation where you have to put acreage limitations and things like that. I'm all for going back to the drawing board. My goal, as always, is going to be protect the neighborhoods. And when we have A1 zoning and by agritourism, by instituting agritourism regulations, we're somehow going to be setting aside other regulations if you're A1 property. I just need to make sure that we're protecting the neighborhoods. So I'll be voting with my colleagues here to bring it back, but I do think that in light of the state statutes, we do need to respond reasonably and protect the neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Bellamy.
Yeah, I'm liking that we're going to a continuance so we can look at this from a different focus lens. My concern is you have staff talking about we want to be proactive, and when I'm listening to some of the potential issues that can come up with events, and you have potentially 1,000 people on 1 acre, and you're talking about traffic and all the different concerns, I would just say move forward with looking at it from a public safety concern. The reality of it, when we're talking about Hunsaker, is far out. Those days are over because a lot of the development is moving out east, and with the development moving out east, if we're not looking at it to see how we can regulate it, next thing you know, you're going to have some NIMBY. People are going to be complaining about things going on to the left, right, or front, or back of them. And again, that's why you be proactive and identify ways that we can get in front of it. So I'm in support of the continuance to see how we can massage this to make sure that it's clear that we're not over-regulating, but we're putting ourselves in situations when residents could potentially be complaining about events that are next door to them, that we have some ways that we can look at it from a different focus lens.
Okay, thank you, sir. All commissioners have spoken, and the board is clear. Ms. Shank, would you please proffer us a motion for continuance, and then if someone would say so moved and someone else would second that?
Well, if you're not inclined to adopt the regulation as written, it would have to be re-advertised in the future. So the motion could read that the second public hearing being planned for June 16th, 2022, at 9:00 a.m. will be continued to no day certain and re-advertised, and staff will report back to the board on some options on further refining the text amendment and maps.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Satcher to continue and a second by Commissioner Baugh. No one is on the board. We've held public comment. We'll hold the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Madam Clerk, that motion passes unanimously. Ms. Shank, would you please introduce our first agenda? Well, I'm sorry, we're going to go to future agenda, citizen comment on future agenda items because we held the time certain first. Is there anyone who would like to come forward at this time to speak on a future agenda item? That's an agenda item that is not on today's agenda, but it may appear on a future agenda before this board. Okay, seeing no one, we'll go to the phone. Has anyone called in to speak on future agenda items?
Clerk needs you.
No, sir.
No, we did this.
Let me close future agenda items first, and then we'll do that. Has anyone called in to speak on future agenda items?
No, sir.
Okay, so we're going to close public comment on future agenda items. And then that was Ms. Shank, you want to address that as
I
number
was going to
6?
say, when we get to number 7, there's no vote required because we're not holding the second public hearing on June 16th. So it's ready to move.
We also advertised today already, so we'll just do a continuance on the next agenda, so you'll see that. So it'll
Perfect.
be on there, but it'll be.
Takes care of it.
Do you want to address item number 7 now
What-
to clear that out, or do we need to address it at all?
No motion required by the board.
Perfect. So we're going to cross number 7 off of our list, and we will go then back to item number 1. Ma'am, if you would please read that.
Item number 1 is resolution appeal of administrative termination AD 2131, resolution R 22005, or R 22006, legislative. Marshall Robinson, principal planner. The applicants submitted a timely request for continuance to August 4th, 2022, at 9:00 a.m. as soon thereafter may be heard. So there's a motion in your packet to open the public hearing and continue to August 4th, 2022, at 9:00 a.m. as soon thereafter may be heard.
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bellamy to continue to August 4th at 9 a.m. Do we have a second? A second by Commissioner Satcher. Is this procedural, Ms. Shank?
Yes.
Okay, so it's procedural, so we will not be opening it up to public comment. We'll go ahead and hold the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Madam Clerk, item number 1 passes unanimously. Ms. Shank, please introduce item number 2.
Okay, number 2 is proposed adoption of ordinance 2247, establishment of Salt Meadows Community Development District. This is a legislative public hearing. Rosina Leidner, Planning Section Manager.
Okay, so this is for a CDD. Does anyone, in its presentation upon request, would anyone request a presentation on the CDD? Okay, Rosina, you made out. No one wants a presentation. We'll open this CDD up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 2, specifically item number 2? Okay, seeing no one, we'll go to the phone. Has anyone called in to speak on number 2?
No, sir.
Is that a yes?
No, sir.
No, okay. So we're going to close public comment and entertain motions.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Baugh and a second by Commissioner Servio to approve item number 2. We'll hold the vote now. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Madam Clerk, item number 2 passes unanimously. Ms. Shank, please introduce item number 3.
Number 3 is proposed ordinance 2223, establishing the Curacy Creek Community Development District. Legislative public hearing. Rosina Leidner, Planning Section Manager.
Okay, another CDD. We'll open this up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 3? Seeing no one, we'll go to the phone. Is anyone called in for item 3?
No, sir.
All right, no phone calls. We're going to close public comment. No one's on the board, so we'll one, would anyone like a presentation?
No.
Okay. Then we'll entertain motions.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Baugh and a second by Commissioner Servia to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Madam Clerk, number 3 passes unanimously
5
Five,
to
sir.
0. 5 to 0.
by a vote of 5-0 because Commissioner Cruz has stepped out. Yes, ma'am. So then we'll move on to item number 4.
And now we're beginning our quasi-judicial public hearings, so the clerk would normally do their introductory items.
Yeah, so we're going to swear in anyone who would like to speak on items 4 or number 5, which is the circus. So anyone who plans to come forward and speak on, let's just say, any additional items during today's meeting, if you intend to speak, you'll be testifying in a quasi-judicial hearing, so please stand and be sworn at this time if you think you might speak.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and representations you're about to make to the Board of County Commissioners are truthful and accurate? Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name, county of residence, and if you've been sworn.
Okay, look like a bunch of honest faces out there. So, Ms. Shank, if you would please introduce item number 4.
Okay, number 4 is zoning ordinance PD PM 2110ZG, Port Authority, Manatee County, Port Master Plan, Development Plan. It's quasi-judicial public hearing. Dorothy Rainey is the planner, along with the Port Authority as a consultant. So this Port Authority is actually the applicant, so I would think they'll be the applicant to go first.
Okay, has there been any ex parte communications on this matter, Commissioners? Okay, seeing none, then we will go to the applicant. Who is here representing the applicant?
Good morning. My name is Diane Chadwick, and I am a planner with Stantec. We'll see how well I do managing your PowerPoint. I had a little problem last time. I'm here today. I have been sworn. My county of residence is Hillsborough County. But I'm here today with Dan Fitzpatrick and George Eisenmaker from Seaport Manatee. Okay. Not going to work. I had trouble. There we go. Whoop. Went too fast. Here we go. First, I'm going to go over the comprehensive plan elements of this application. This orients you to the site, although I know you're very aware of the boundaries of Port Manatee. The white line on this map does show the outer boundaries, and the green on the map is the heavy industrial future land use, which of course is the major portion of the active areas of the port. The teal color is the light industrial, which is mainly the wetlands and conservation areas to the south of the port. This is the zoning map for the port, and again, the white boundary is the outer boundary of the port, and the vast majority of it already has a planned development Port Manatee zoning. There is a very small area up along Piney Point Road that still has an agricultural A1 zoning district, and part of this request is to bring that into the Port Manatee zoning district and make a unified site. So this kind of zooms into that area. It is 9.9 acres to be zoned along Piney Point. We can't figure out why, but when the general development plan was approved in 2005, this was left out. We could not trace back why that was. So we're correcting that oversight at this point. 1.9 acres of that is north of Piney Point Road, and the remainder of it is south of Piney Point Road. Whoops. Okay. Sorry. It's very touchy. So that's there. Okay. So the second part of this request is to adopt a master development plan for the entire 1,112 acres, and that includes the rezone parcels. The port currently does have a general development plan approved from 2005, and that is still valid. The master development plan looks very much like what you're used to seeing of the general development plans, and it looks very much like the old general development plan for the port. But the master development plan is meant to function very similarly to the general development plan with just a few little nuances. Your staff report is very, very detailed, and I have to give kudos to Dorothy. She's worked really hard on this application because it's pretty much a new animal for what the staff is used to working with. So she's really worked really hard with us on this. So the major components of that master development plan include identifying over 1.2 million square feet of existing square feet on the property and the proposed maximum square feet of new construction for a total of 4 million square feet. We brought forward the permitted uses from the old general development plan. The same thing with required open spaces, setbacks, building heights. The vast majority of the old general development plan has been brought forward into this. We did do a transportation study that was completed for a 20-year building approval time period. There were some identified off-site improvements, and those have been shown on the master development plan, and they will be detailed in the concurrency certificate when it comes out. Seaport Manatee, as you well know, already coordinates closely with FDOT for their roadway improvements as they're a part of the strategic intermodal system for the state. So the purpose of the Manufacturing Competitiveness Act was to incentivize manufacturing uses in the industry and job growth. And it established that sites for, that you could bring about sites with, for manufacturing uses or new potential sites for manufacturing uses. There's a lot of existing sites that this could be used for. And it also acknowledges that ancillary uses are a part of an industrial manufacturing facility and that they are there in support. The Act created an expedited review process and allows for any local government within the state of Florida to adopt this legislation by establishing appropriate land uses and establishing a manufacturing master development plan process, review process, and it creates an approval process in a land development code. It allows the ability for the master development plan approved sites to proceed development without requiring an additional local site plan approval. It still requires state permits and it still requires building permits. Those are not voided with this act. The process for the Manufacturing Competitiveness Act is under the oversight of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. And I will tell you that DEO actually provides Manatee County's code to other jurisdictions as the template to use in the future. So if they so choose to do that. I want to give you a little bit of history on this. This idea was brought to Manatee County by Tropicana back several years ago to make Florida more competitive with other states. Their local liaison and governmental affairs person traveled all over the U.S. and kept seeing how other places could just move so quickly. And so we brought about this process to allow for moving it forward and getting things done quicker. It's important to note that there are only 3 jurisdictions that have adopted this process. That's Manatee County, City of Bradenton, and Volusia County. They're the only ones in the entire state have taken advantage of this, which is surprising to me, but it is. Only 2 jurisdictions have approved master development plans. That's Manatee County and City of Bradenton, both of which were for the benefit of Tropicana. So, but what this does, it assures long-term viability for manufacturing facilities and that master plans can be allowed a 20-year approval period. The way you go about setting this up is you establish eligibility areas. And you must do that in order to use this process. So this map shows the areas located in red are the eligibility areas that Manatee County put in. So down on the very south end of this, you can identify probably the Tropicana plant. There's a very small site at US 41 and I-275. And then the vast majority of it is up around Port Manatee in the northwest area. And again, such a large area was put up around the port was to incentivize development around the port for industrial development. You have to have certain zoning categories and certain future land use categories, all industrial related. Back in 2019, Manatee County completed a Northwest Manatee study, and it reviewed 6,000 acres surrounding the port. Some of you were on this board at the time that was done. The report discussed the need for creating expediting, permitting, and shovel-ready sites. And there were many tools brought out in that report that could be used, but this act was one of the ones that was identified. And Seaport Manatee, although it was not in the physical land area of that study, it was a part of the study and was a very strong stakeholder in the study. And they felt that this was an excellent tool for them to use to promote expedited development within the port boundaries. It's a little slow on the uptake here. So where we go from here is to keep the master development plan process moving. We're requesting the rezone of the 9.9 acres from Plan Development Port Manatee to Plan Development Port Manatee to unify the port ownership so that everything within the port boundaries has the same zoning. And upon approval by this board, new construction and redevelopment within the port boundaries going forward would not require an individual county site plan approval. It does require a building permit. I'll say that again. It will require a building permit. It will require state-level permits. Letters have already been sent from DEO to the state agencies that are involved in this process and would be the permitting folks for the typical stuff construction gets. So they have already been notified, those agencies have already been notified that this is coming forward, and they identify for them the timeframes they have to do their expedited review. We will have continued coordination with the county utilities and county transportation. The development will still require a licensed engineer to design a site. They couldn't just go out there and put down a big slab and start building a parking lot. They still have to have an engineer create site plans under state statutes and what's required under their licensure to actually build a site. And that licensed engineer will have to attest that their site plans meets the criteria of this master development plan. And most importantly, it allows support to move quickly and on to new projects. And at that point, we'll stop, and I think Dorothy's going to talk to you, and then we'll be available for questions if you have any. You going to talk? Are you?
Okay, so that's the end of your presentation, ma'am? Is that what I'm gathering? Okay, so that concludes applicant presentation. There are no commissioners on the board with questions, so we will move now to staff presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dorothy Rainey for staff, and I have been sworn.
So Dorothy, I think you can probably just give us the highlights.
I was going to say, it's all repetition. Actually, they were very thorough, so, yeah.
You can sort of skim through the highlights.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, as Diane mentioned, the master development plan pretty much mirrors the previously approved general development plan, which is still valid until this gets approved, then it takes the place of it. And there, like she said, there's going to be a skipping of the final site plan process or the planning and zoning approval processes that would normally be required. They go straight to building permit. However, our staff, like concurrency and transportation and all that, have done reviews and have stipulations or conditions in place to allow them to do the review of the building permits for their issues and their standards and requirements that need to be met by the project, since it's bypassing the usual process. Yeah, that's really the only extra item that I wanted to emphasize that Diane did actually go over it. But yeah, that's all that I can add to it, just
Okay.
to confirm that information for you.
Okay, thank you. No one's on the board for questions for staff, so we'll open this item to public comment. It's quasi judicial, so we will not be opening up the phone lines. It'll only be for people in the chamber. Is there anyone who would like to come forward to speak on item number 4? Anyone like to speak specifically on item number 4? Okay, seeing no one, then we will close public comment, and we will go to closing comments from staff. No closing comments. Any closing comments from the applicant? Seeing none, we'll close that, and we will go now to commissioner deliberations and vote. The order of the board is Servia and Bellamy and Cruz. Commissioner Servia.
Yes, I just want to say thank you, Diane Chadwick. Thank you, Dorothy, for your work on this. For those of you who don't know, Diane Chadwick has been doing this type of work with our master development plans at Tropicana and now Seaport Manatee for a very long time. And it is a very, very good and effective process for incentivizing those really good jobs for that economic engine that make this area hum. So it's very contained, it is very structured, and the proper regulation is in place. It's not overregulated. Thank you very much for your work. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Bellamy.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Manatee County zoning ordinance number PD PM 21-10ZG.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Bellamy, who wears a second hat as the chairman of the Manatee County Port Authority, and a second by Commissioner Servia. Commissioner Cruz, you're still on the board, sir.
Yeah, I don't really need to be over. This should have been a presentation request. I mean, I think the very first Port Authority meeting I ever was a part of, I said we need to rezone like every square inch of that area to start expanding our port and encouraging development and companies move in. So we 100% need to do this. I think we need to do it even more and start allowing as of right development to start encouraging more air products and other companies to come in, because we've got a lot of stuff coming into our port, not as much stuff going out of our port, and we need to start fixing that for the good of this economy as a whole. So 100% on support and on board on this one.
Okay, thank you, sir. No other commissioners are on the board, so let's hold the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Madam Clerk, it passes unanimously. So for those, 6-0. For those of you who came, we had to hold the first item at 9 a.m. because it was advertised that way, and there is a method to this madness. At the conclusion of that, there would not have been enough time to get the circus item held before our 10:30 recess. That's why we pushed all the other stuff through as quickly as we could. We're now going to go ahead and hold our recess for 10 minutes. When we come back after the 10-minute break, we will immediately be taking up item number 5, which is the Onico item. So we're in recess until 10:27. Okay, welcome back. So we're moving right along here. We only have 2 items left. We'll move on to item number 5. Ms. Shank, if you would please introduce that agenda item.
Number 5 is proposed zoning ordinance PDMU 2115 ZG, Cirque Italia, 53rd Avenue East rezone. The quasi-judicial public hearing, the planner is Marsha Robinson. The proposal is to rezone 2 parcels of approximately 5.66 acres from the PRM, Professional Office Medium, and RSF 6 Residential Single Family Zone Districts to the PDMU, Plan Development Mixed Use Zoning District, and request approval of a general development plan for a 2-story multi-use building having 20,000 square feet of office, commercial, and up to 8 multifamily residential units, a 52,000 square foot performance area consisting of 12,800 square feet entry concession tent, a 20,345 square foot performance tent, and a grass parking spaces for medium-intensity recreational uses, and approving a schedule of permitted and prohibited uses is voluntary profit by the applicant, and the case planner, Marsha Robinson.
Thank you, Ms. Shank. Commissioners, has anyone had any ex parte communication regarding this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I will just remind the audience that it is a quasi-judicial hearing, and if there are like outbursts and that sort of thing, that can actually work against you, because after this, if the applicant is denied, they would go on into a court hearing situation, and what happened in this hearing weighs into that heavily, and if anything happened outside of the ordinary, it could work against you. So we want to make sure that this flows appropriately. Okay, we're going to start with the applicant presentation. Who is here to represent the applicant?
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Scott Rudisil with Blaylock Walters, and I have been sworn. If we could pull up there we go. All right, I'm going to start by introducing the project team here. We have Cameron Miller, who is our project planner with ZNS, also Margaret Tusing with ZNS on the project. Adam Lyon is the civil engineer on the project with ZNS as well. Michael Yates, the traffic engineer with Palm Traffic. Joel Christian is our environmental consultant with Ardura, and Darren Autry, the architect with Zoller Autry. All right. So this is the site. It's approximately 5.7 acres located on State Road 70 East, just east of the intersection with 15th Street East. State Road 70 in this location is a 6-lane arterial roadway. This is a picture of the project site, which some of you may know as the former Onico Glass property. This is a picture from when our client acquired the property. So there's been some cleanup on the site already. There were some folks living in those buildings in the front, and there were some folks living in the property in the rear. So the cleanup has been ongoing. This is a picture of the property to the east of this site on State Road 70. And then to the west of the site, it's a vacant area owned by DOT. So the county's comprehensive plan encourages redevelopment and infill. Well, this is a true redevelopment and infill project. It is located within the Southwest TIF district, and it's located in an area of the county that has not seen a lot of redevelopment interest. The request before you is to rezone the site from PRM and RSF 6 to PDMU with a general development plan for 20,000 square feet of retail office uses, 8 multifamily residential units, and then a grassed area to be utilized for temporary medium-intensity recreational uses for a portion of the year. So the temporary rec uses is what grabs the headlines here for everyone. But it's important to remember that the primary component of this request is the redevelopment of a dilapidated commercial building with a new mixed-use structure, including retail, office, and residential units which is exactly what the county has envisioned for these activity node areas. But we're going to talk about the temporary recreation, so let me get into that. The temporary recreation area would be grassed open space for 90% of the year, with the option to have up to 40 days per year of the Circatalia use. Circatalia is not a circus with lions and tigers. It is a Cirque du Soleil style performance. For those that are familiar, it's been going on within the Riviera Dunes community in Pound Meadow for the last several years. And just to give you an idea on timing, we talk about 40 days per year. Each of those permits would be for a maximum of 20 days. That includes your setup and your takedown. So when you get a 20-day permit, you're really talking about 2 weekends of actual performance, which, 2 of those 20-day periods, you're talking about 4 weekends of actual performances throughout the entire year. So that's what the request is. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Cameron to get into some of the details of the request.
All right, thank you, Scott. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Cameron Miller. I'm a planner with ZNS Engineering, and I have been sworn. So I got about 4 slides here to just go over the land use and the zoning, as well as the general development plan. Starting with the future land use map, you can see the property outlined in red here. The southern end there is designated as an ROR, future land use category. That is where the true mixed-use building is proposed to go. And on the northern portion there is the Res 9 future land use category. On there, we will have the temporary performance area. This is permissible in the Res 9 district as a temporary recreational use. Sticking with the comprehensive plan, here is a map of the urban service area, or map H in the comprehensive plan. This outlines the county's goals for redevelopment and infill development within this certain area, which we believe we are hitting. I also want to point out the activity node that we are in for commercialized use for 53rd Ave and 15th Street East. Moving on to the zoning, you see, as Scott pointed out, the PRM is on the southern end of the portion, and then the RSF-6 zoning on the northern portion. I do want to point out that there is also further to the east, you'll see heavier commercial, or to the west, I apologize, for the heavy commercial, general commercial, we also have light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing. So we believe that this mixed use could be a good transition point from these higher intensity uses. Lastly, here is the general development plan on the right-hand side here. Some general information, the gross area is 5.66 acres. The mixed-use development is going to be on 1.5 acres. The density of that is 3.3 dwelling units per acre, and the FAR is 0.25. For the performance area, that is the remaining 4.16 acres, the FAR is 0.29. We are greatly exceeding the open space requirements at 78%. As Scott alluded to, that is due to keeping these parking areas up on the northern end here as grass area. For the parking spaces, we're proposing 128 spaces. And for screening, we are exceeding those expectations in Table 7-4, whereas a recreational use needs 10 feet of screening buffers, we are providing 20. So that ends my little portion of this presentation. I just want to reiterate that we are meeting the requirements of the Land Development Code while also meeting some of these goals of the comprehensive plan. So, hand it over. Thank you for your time.
All right. We do have 3 specific approval requests related to the site. It is elimination of landscaped islands, elimination of vehicle use area plantings, and elimination of wheel stops. This is all related to the grass parking area, not to the traditional parking. Those are traditional parking requirements. We didn't think they were appropriate for a grass field, and staff was in agreement with that. We have also included several stipulations to further limit the temporary uses. We have a provision in Schedule B for that prohibits alcoholic beverage sales on the temporary rec use. We have a stipulation for no outdoor storage, so when this site is not being used for the temporary rec, it will be a grass field, and that will be all that it will be. We have a stipulation related to no lodging or overnight stay associated with that use. And then the maximum number of seats for any event is limited to 400. I think it's important to note that for each performance period, there will also be a temporary use permit process. So every time they come in, they don't just rely on these approvals. They will go through an adverse impact review with the temporary use permit. They will further drill down on the specifics of that performance. So for example, one of the things that is almost universally required is to have law enforcement on the site to conduct traffic management. They do that with every show, but those are the types of issues that they'll look at the temporary permit stage. We are in agreement with the staff report. We appreciate staff's efforts on this project. We're in agreement with the proposed stipulations. This did receive a recommendation of approval from your Planning Commission, and we're asking for your approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. There are no commissioners on the board for questions for the applicant. So then we'll move on to staff presentation. Marshall?
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. My name is Marshall Robinson. I am a staff planner, and I have been sworn. This project, in addition to what Mr. Rudisill provided for us, kind of highlights the method by which we did our review. And the first thing that we looked at when the request came in is the request appropriate? And we get a little bit into our definitions of how we define certain uses, and at first glance, we thought we were dealing with the circus that was being requested on this property. But after further review of how we define such uses, we find out that in order to be a circus per our definitions, you must include animals. So being as how there are no animals being requested as a part of the use, then we have to look for other definitions that we define that most closely relate to the request being asked for. And that's where we got to the medium intensity recreational use. Because in that definition, they include performing arts. And so we all agreed that based on the information that was submitted, this was a performing arts, and we had to classify it as a medium intensity recreational use. So the request is appropriate because we have permissibility there. But we also have to account for our comprehensive plan consistency when we look at the different policies that guide and direct things like compatibility. So when we looked at those plan policies, we tried to figure out how do we shore the gap of any incompatibilities that this request might present. So we pulled out all the stops that the Land Development Code has to offer for us. We have stipulations, we have a site-controlled plan, and we also have a temporary use permit that would be required. So trying to figure out how we can mitigate for the incompatibilities or even any negative aspects that might have come to light throughout our review, we tried to package the request and bring it to the board in probably the most responsible way, considering the other alternative options that could be used on the property. It is Res 9 in the northern portion of the site, which has permissibility under the range of potential uses for some density, and they are in an activity node where they meet locational criteria, so they could get incentives to get increased density on that property if they were able to develop it and mitigate any kind of site constraints it has. So when the applicant and staff started working through some of these issues, we started investigating things to try to close the gap of incompatibility, and that's where we landed on the commitment from the applicant to not have this use any more than 40 days out of the year. And on top of that, no single event to last more than 20 days. So we felt like that for the north part of the property that's constrained pretty significantly with environmentally sensitive lands, that we felt that this is, in terms of impact, probably a lesser degree of impact because we don't touch the content for the use. We look to our definitions of how it's defined, and then we figure out whether or not it has any permissibility based on the zoning and the consistency of the comprehensive plan. So from a compatibility standpoint, we felt like that the stipulations that regulated the length of the events and the duration of any single event, we felt like that really closed the gap for compatibility, especially when we look to the code and we see where they exceeded the minimum requirement of 10-foot buffers along the north and west property boundary where they're adjacent to residential uses. They increased that from the minimum 10 and put it at 20. They also asked for some specific approvals in their parking, and given the temporary nature of the use, we felt that it was appropriate to ask for those waivers on the parking, seeing as how it wouldn't occur any longer than 40 days out of the year, and the rest of the time it's to remain as open space. So that's kind of how we went through the review of it. And one of the great things about cases like this is we get to bring it into a public hearing, so we can kind of put all of the findings that staff made into a technically written report, and then kind of have a dialogue about what the issues are. I would note that the property is located between two activity nodes defined by the code. The project was pitched as an infill development with mixed uses up along the commercially classified road or arterial roadway. And into the north, we felt like that, as far as the degree of impacts, given the length of the uses and whatnot, that it's an appropriate request. They have permissibility and they have consistency with the code. The issue here, I think, is a neighborhood issue that needs to be presented to the board and talked about. So that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Commissioner Servia is on the board.
Yes, and some of these questions may be for you or the applicant. I didn't get on the board quickly enough to ask them of the applicant, so we may have to bring them back up here. Okay, so the existing zoning is professional medium and RSF 6.
Mm-hmm.
Is a rezone necessary for both the multifamily uses and the medium intensity recreational facility? It is necessary. This was the only option to accomplish?
Yes, Commissioner Servia. They were proposing a vertically integrated structure to house the mix of uses. And, the Euclidean zoning that sits on the property today, I don't think would allow them to integrate all of those uses over the residential and the office zoning districts. That's why we looked at the PDMU.
Okay, and what about tree removal? Have you assessed that at this stage? I know there are a lot of trees on the property. Can you address that a little bit? And again, if it's better that the applicant address it, we can go to the applicant.
Thank you. I'd like to let the applicant address it, but we do have Mr. Gary Race here who might also be able to speak on behalf of staff. Would the applicant like to address the trees?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's our expectation that a lot of the trees, particularly in the area on the northern side of the project, will be preserved. I mean, I don't know if we can pull up the aerial back up. Boley's Creek runs through the middle of the site, so you're going to have an area, I think we've got a 30-foot buffer area on either side of Boley's Creek that is proposed as open space, and then north of that, there's no development proposed at all. So I would expect that in that area in particular that there will be a significant amount of tree preservation.
Okay, but it sounds like you haven't fully analyzed it at this stage, but you will.
That's right.
Okay. Right. Can you tell me the distance from the nearest residential to either your proposed parking spaces or the circus tent or whatever would be the closest improvement?
The setback internal on the site is a minimum of 50 feet from the proposed recreation area. So there's a 20-foot buffer and then a 50-foot setback, and that's a minimum, because remember, we have to comply with the additional setbacks for the height. So depending on what tents are used, there could be additional setbacks related to meet the compatibility for height as well. But it would be a minimum of 50 feet from the property line.
Okay. And so can you also tell us how are you planning to address lighting and noise as it relates to the neighborhood with this use?
So as it relates to noise, first of all, I would again note we're proposing a buffer, a 20-foot buffer that is twice the buffer that would be required for a permanent medium intensity recreational use adjacent to residential. So even though this is only a temporary use that will only be here 10% of the year or less. We're proposing double the buffer that would be required under your code. You also have a county code that provides specific noise levels for residential uses as a receiving site when they're adjacent to commercial property. So, and this is something that our client, I mean, they do shows all over the country. They are accustomed to dealing with this. They have a decibel reader on site, so they monitor the noise levels during the show to make sure that they remain in compliance with the noise levels. So I think those are two things. I'd also, if we could pull up, because I think it's important to give a little bit of context. If we could go to the EMO on the noise discussion. So this is our site, and just to kind of give context to some of the surrounding uses in terms of potential impacts on the residential areas. So within 500 feet to the east of our site is a rail line, right? Within 500 feet to the west of the site, we have general commercial, heavy commercial zoning with an ROR, future land use designation. We have a 6-lane state highway abutting the property to the south. And then within 500 feet to the north, you have heavy industrial uses with the asphalt plant. So there is a wide mix of uses in this area. And we think from a noise standpoint that what's proposed here is pretty benign.
Can I ask you or your planner a question about compatibility? Do you feel that taking this zoning this far north, is it intrusive to the neighborhood, or is it compatible with the neighborhood? I'd just like your professional opinion.
Sure, I'll let Cameron start that, and then I might jump in.
Thank you, Commissioner Servia. We do believe that it is compatible, especially in the sense of it is temporary. It's only 10% of the year. The rest of it is green space for the remainder of the year. And if you again look east and farther, you'll see that the mixed use is a good transition point for this general commercial, heavy commercial, and also provides little impact for a majority of the year.
So the fact that it is so temporary is very interesting and unique about this proposal. If it were all the time, would you feel differently? If it were a full-time use, would your compatibility analysis be different?
In my opinion, going off the mitigation factors that we are implementing and going above and beyond, I don't think it would have too much of a drastic impact where I wouldn't say it's not compatible. I would say it's, we're mitigating these factors. We have these stipulations where the compatibility and such as Marshall, Mr. Robinson was saying, we're shoring that gap, and then that compatibility is, in that right range for this use and the surrounding uses.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Baugh and Cruz. Commissioner Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. So you basically covered, Marshall, you or the applicant, it doesn't matter here, I don't think. You basically covered why staff is in agreement that this is compatible with a residential area. Is that correct?
I wouldn't.
Your opinion?
In my professional opinion, I felt like that the degree to which we mitigated the incompatibility that was observed in the request, it was staff's opinion that it was appropriate to move forward with the mitigation that was put in place. I don't want to say that I agree that this is compatible. I don't want to say that. But what I would like to say is that I don't know that it's possible for us to reach a conclusion of 100% compatibility on projects. We have to use judgment, and we have to use good planning practice of implementation mechanisms provided by the code, one of which is a temporary use permit that we look to, which allows us to further regulate the development beyond the GDP. Because in a temporary use permit, we're allowed to control the hours of operation. We're allowed to control on-site ingress, egress, and circulation of traffic flow. We do that through a temporary use permit. Our county attorney advised us not to ask for those in stipulations because of the enforceability of it, I believe. So we kicked that to the TUP. And so, that's, in my opinion, Commissioner Ball, that's the importance of these public hearings, so nuances of the surrounding property owners can have a voice to come and say things about the project that maybe not be in the application packet. And so that's one of the, but, compatibility, 100% agreement of compatibility. I'm not going to stand here and say that I feel like this is 100% compatible, but I will say, Commissioner, I feel like that we worked really hard to try to package a request and put it in front of you that exercised all of the provisions available to us in the code and the comp plan to try to be responsible in that review. We don't give recommendations, so we don't really support or not support. We're just on a fact-finding mission to bring you the particulars of the case and let the case be decided on those facts.
Now is one of those times when I would love to look at the applicant and staff and say, all right, let me rephrase the question. Would you buy a home and live there next to it? But I'm not going to ask that.
Thank you.
My other thought process is that I'm not sure what we're even talking about. It's not a circus, but it's entertainment. What exactly are we talking about? I mean, I don't see how you can ask this board to vote for something when we're not even sure what it is. Can someone help with that? I mean, what are we talking about?
I'll kick that to the applicant, if
I
that's
figured
okay.
you might. Good one, Marshall.
Sorry.
I would like to clarify one of your questions. PRM doesn't allow retail commercial uses.
Can you speak closer to the mic, Rosina? I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing you myself.
I don't know if it's working.
I don't think it is, actually.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, now we can.
Okay, about a question that you have about the uses. In the current zoning, RSF doesn't allow medium intensity recreational. That is one of the uses that are proposed. And in PRM is not allowed commercial retail. Since the bottom part is in ROR, commercial retail is one of the allowed uses. And for this reason, the planned development mixed use is the appropriated zoning for the application.
Now you really got my curiosity up because you talk about retail. I can't imagine. Okay.
Yeah, because the application includes 10,000 of commercial uses, commercial and offices, but commercial retail is not allowed within the current zoning classification that is PRM.
Okay.
That's only clarification.
Scott, I can't wait for you to tell me what we're talking about here. I don't understand.
Well, first of all, what's being requested is temporary, medium-intensity recreation, right? What the applicant actually does is, it's like a Cirque du Soleil, I've never been, but it's like a Cirque du Soleil style performance in a tent. So you have, performance seating and they do shows in the tent.
And what are these shows about? I mean, you say it's not a circus, but yet you compare it when you talk about circus. It's still confusing. What exactly do they do?
I think it's a lot of acrobatics, and have you ever been to a Cirque du Soleil?
Yes,
show?
I have, but you said it's not really, it's not a circus. I mean, it's
Right.
a lot of, I have been to that, but is that what we're talking about here? Is that what you want to call it? In other words, they're going to have, material that they hang from and do twirlies and all this kind of stuff.
That is exactly what they do. That is what the shows are. Yeah, it's a performance acrobatic.
Performance. I don't think you're really being very clear on this, Scott. But anyway, okay. All right, thank you. I'll just wait. Thank you.
Okay.
So I feel like I'm on the Seinfeld episode where Elaine says, and yada, 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 yada.
But I would offer this too, is we might want to look at, as staff, we might want to look at the definition of a circus, because I know circuses are heading away from having live animals in today's day and age, and so that might be something that we want to look at in the future. So I'll talk to Nicole about that.
Okay, Commissioner Bellamy and Commissioner Cruz, Commissioner Cruz and then Commissioner Bellamy are on the board. Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, I have a question, and go for either one that may or may not have done this. This show just happened, right? I mean, recently I drove past it up at Riviera Dunes. So presumably, whatever acrobatics were being performed in that tent recently are similar, substantially similar to the show that will be done behind these houses. One of the questions, both in terms of the negative aspects in the staff report and questions we've had for people, is noise, for instance. We just had kind of a proof of concept sitting up there at Riviera Dunes. We know what the buffer is going to be between this tent and the homes. Did anybody walk up there and with any kind of monitor and be able to relay to us what the noise was and whether or not it was excessive?
Commissioner, I did not.
All right. It seemed like we had a perfect opportunity because this was going through the planning stage. People knew this was coming in front of us. So being able to come to us and say, look, here's the noise counter we did and it conforms to every ordinance we've got, or, hey, it was really loud and people at Riviera Dunes were calling 311 and complaining all night long for 40 days straight. That would have been helpful information.
Commissioner, I just wanted to add one part about the adverse impacts that would be conducted at the time of final site plan, which that's the mechanism by which we would measure the noise.
I get it, but they're not going to set up a tent and put on a performance so you can test the noise. We literally just had it open. I understand the progression that we normally do it,
standard.
But it seems like it would have been a pretty convenient thing to take care of at this point and not say, well, because it seems like every time something contentious comes before us, we find some way of kicking it down the road and making it not our problem. Like, well, you can approve this today, and then when it comes to final site plan approval, then we as the staff will handle whether or not it conforms to the next level. It just would have been nice. I'm just saying if we're going to list that as one of the few negative issues in our staff report, and we had the ability to prove or disprove it like 2 weeks ago, it would have been convenient.
Well, I don't know if any noise levels were taken, but I will say this. We did reach out to the city of Palmetto, and we asked them if they've had any complaints over the years, and they said they have had no complaints regarding Circuitalia at the city of Palmetto, and they're the jurisdiction that's responsible for the event.
Okay. Next question. Part of this is rezoning to R9 because I guess that allows for some level of recreational use, or what was it called, the entertainment, or I'm trying to find the page at this point. It allowed for, scrolled up while I was waiting. R9, I can't find it, but the R9 allowed for this use in theory, but the actual policy number 2.2.1.13.2 says these kind of things are allowed as support uses. Would we consider a circus, regardless of whether or not it is inclusive of animals or conforms to our definition of a circus? Would we consider that support use for the residences?
I'll jump in while Marshall, unless we're seeing.
Rest 9 allow for recreational uses.
Agree, but the word support uses is in there. It says support uses including neighborhood residential, blah, blah, blah.
Recreational uses include low, medium, and intensity uses. Is not clarified in the policy and the comprehensive plan, and neighborhood commercial uses is for retail.
This literally
And
says,
retail.
I'm just reading the words. The
Yes.
words say primarily medium density residential and high density clustered residential development with support uses such as neighborhood commercial, office, public, semi-public, recreation, and school uses. The term recreation is
Well, Commissioner, can I help?
upon support use.
Since I wrote it, I'd like to respond to it. So this is not the principal use of the property. It's not the focal point of the property. Based on the limitation of the duration for it and the 40 days of the property, then the word support kind of has some extended meaning behind it, I think, but context matters. So when we're offering a use at 40 days out of the year, okay, support to the technical definition of the word, but I interpreted that it's appropriate in this case because it's not a principal use, it's not occurring 24/7. It's in there as a mixed-use project, and it's one component of the project that has limited duration to it.
Fair enough. I disagree, but I mean for two reasons. One, these are two parcels. Let's be honest. We can call this what it is. I'm more than happy. I'll approve the front part of this thing today. We need 8 small studio apartments right there and some extra commercial. I'll approve that all day long.
sir.
And that's not even being zoned the same.
Yes,
It just so happened that when someone bought the front part for a conforming good use for the community, they happened to get a bunch of trees in the back, and they said, hey, we can pitch a tent and have a show. So I consider this two separate parcels, not one. So to say, well, that's kind of not so, that's not, but to say it's only 40 days, that part doesn't, that doesn't resonate with me. I mean, by your logic, the primary use of the Lake Ranch Polo Grounds is not polo because they only do it like 20 days a year. Well, what else are you doing on
But
that
the
site?
recreation's a permitted use, Commissioner.
I get it, but I'm still reading the words that you wrote saying support uses such as recreation, not such as neighborhood commercial as well as all recreation. It was structured as a support use for the neighborhood. So that's all I'm going. I'm curious what the real rationale here is, and that's up to them to decide. But if you can get this rezoned R9, this property is way more valuable than whatever rent you're paying for the land next to Riviera Dudes. I mean, people are begging for land, and we're begging for people to build apartments. If you had R9 land, near major thoroughfares with infrastructure, next to resident, I'd rather you build a bunch of R9 apartments, especially, in Eco, where we could use
And
the housing
Commissioner,
right
there's
now. So you
permissions
could
for
probably
that.
sell that, you could probably bifurcate this, do what you want to do on the front part, take the R9 rezone on the back end, sell that thing for enough profit where you can rent that land next to Riviera Dunes for the next 100 years. So I don't really get the concept of what they're trying to do here, but you answer my questions. The main one was about the noise, the rest of it I just kind of went off on a tangent.
Commissioner, I just raised that it's not a request to rezone to R9. Res 9 is the future land use. They're asking to rezone to PDMU.
Understood.
Yeah.
No, I do understand.
Bellamy, then Baugh. Commissioner Bellamy.
Yeah, I have a couple of concerns with this, and the reality of it is, and very, very, very rarely have you been lost for words, which really concerns me when we're trying to get a description of what's going to actually take place. I've been up here for like 2.5, 3 years, and always deemed you as probably one of the most professional and well-presented people, and for you to not be able to give us a clear understanding of what's going to take place, I'm concerned with that. The second thing, and I've said this many a times when we use the word compatibility, what the community identifies as compatibility and what we have in our codes and what's written as compatibility is totally different. So Commissioner Cruz brought up a point. Yes, we definitely need the apartments and things like that. That's compatible, and it's a need because we're in a housing crisis. The second part, as far as the other parcel, okay, that's the elephant in the room. That's why everybody's here, because they're concerned about it. But the reality of it is, and I'm sure you're going to come back and do great, lawyer things because you're that guy. And I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that. But bring it down to me at a level so we can understand and everybody else can understand what will take place on that property. And the reality of it is, the apartments, yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. We'll approve that right now. Let's move. But there's no way in the world. Well, she just pushed the button, so I probably should calm down. But I'm just concerned about it. So I want to make sure. I want to make sure it's clear. And we just referenced what took place in Palmetto, all right? And what took place in Palmetto. If you look at the location, all right, to the west of that, we have the highway, and then we have the river or the water, whatever you all want to. To the east of that, we have a little bit, and then probably well over 1,000 feet, maybe 2,000. That's where you get close to the water and Riviera Dunes. To the north of that, to the direct north of it, is the convention center. All right. To the direct south of that, is the water. All right. Now, which is probably why they were successful so much in Palmetto, because that location, for whatever noise or for whatever lighting and everything like that, was very unlikely to be complained about because everything was so distant and so far away. Now here we are, again, the unknown on what's taking place as far as bringing it into an area where the surrounding, if you go north, south, east, or west, right, you please don't use the word compatible. Let's just find a way for us to make it work if that's what you're all trying to do, because compatible, there's no way in the world you can say what took place in Palmetto is compatible to that location in off 53rd. So my concern, and I asked her this, and you all normally do this, Scott. Did y'all have a neighborhood meeting? Neighborhood meeting? Okay.
I think we're about to have a neighborhood meeting in just a moment when we get to public comment.
Commissioner, to answer your question, yes, we had a Zoom conference neighborhood meeting.
How many people on there, Scott?
There were, I think, 4 people on there, something like that.
All right,
We sent out like 150 or 75 notices or something like that. And the Zoom conferences have been the way that kind of everybody moved during COVID. And for a lot of people, they're a lot more convenient than meeting in person. So, we weren't trying to not have people come out. It's just that, that's the way we've been holding those neighborhood workshops.
I'm done now, Mr. Chairman, for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Bellamy. We're going to go to the county attorney, land use attorney, for a quick comment. Ms. Shank?
Yes, I was going to hold my comments to the end, but just based on the conversation, you were pushing the applicant's attorney to describe the performances. I just want to be careful where we go with this. They are protected by the First Amendment, where those performances are. We can't get into that. You have to assume it's a recreational performance, and is that compatible with the area, given the zone district they're asking for, their mitigation options. And keep in mind, too, once the use is approved, they're protected by the Byrd-Harris Act, they're protected by the comp plan property rights element, you have limited ability on a temporary use permit to attach any stipulation they object to. So we shouldn't be relying on that temporary use permit excessively. This is the day we're making that decision on compatibility. We can't consider where it's paranormal or assume the most intense recreational performance you can think of, assume the noisiest performance you can think of, and that's what you're voting on. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, ma'am. The order of the board is Baugh and then Cruz. Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I understand what the county attorney's saying, but I'm also thinking about the community as a whole, and I'm certainly not going to, be hindered in any way looking at an application. I have to think about the community as a whole. So I did look back, and because of the county attorney and her statement, I will not ask the question that I was getting ready to ask with information that I received looking back on the Planning Commission action and some of the comments. I guess they could make them, I won't, so I don't take a chance on being inappropriate. But I will just wait until we move further along, and then I'll vote my conscience on this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Cruz.
I'm just going to be real quick. This isn't a question. I know we're not deliberating now. I understand the thing, but it's in response to the county attorney. That shouldn't be a decision relative to this board. I mean, if you look a couple hundred feet the other way, there's a movie theater, and they show R-rated movies all the time. I mean, I think this is a real compatibility issue relative. I'm just saying, it's true. I mean, I'm not going to start restricting what kind of movies AMC can show because there's people living nearby. This is a compatibility issue, a noise issue. There's a lot of other things we need to discuss whether or not this is it. And what they're showing inside of a tent is I think should be outside the scope of the bigger picture. We're here to discuss zoning and compatibility for development, not the content of a show, because they do have age restrictions. They're just like movie theaters do. And I would argue it's easier to sneak into an R-rated movie than sneak into a tent.
Okay, thank you, sir. So there's no one else on the board for questions for the applicant or for staff. So then we're going to move into public comment. We will only be taking public comment from people who are here in the audience today because it is quasi-judicial and you are essentially testifying. I have, I believe, 9 cards that have been turned in for public comment. I'm going to start with the one person who has filled out a card and has enough signatures to speak for a group, and that's Margie Nanny, a pretty familiar Oneiko name. I think if there were a mayor of Oneiko, this would be her. So, Ms. Nanny, you'll have 10 minutes to speak for your group, on behalf of your group, and please state your first, your last name, your county of residence, and stay on topic, please.
Margie Nanny, Manatee County, and I have not been sworn. I'm sorry. I've got.
Thank you for your honesty, and if anyone else steps up and you have not been sworn, if you have not been sworn and you wish to speak or you think you may speak, please stand up at this time, and you can be sworn with Mrs. Nanny.
I do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Margie Nanny, Manatee County, and yes, I have been sworn. I do have a PowerPoint that I'll be using, And I'll wait till the first screen comes up, and then if you turn that green light on. Mr. Chairman, members of the Manatee County Board of Commissioners and staff, thank you for allowing me to speak for a group of concerned citizens who are opposed to Circatalia's rezoning request. I'm hitting the button, there we go. We don't want an R-rated horror-themed circus in Old Onico. This is not a typical rezoning application, and we plead with you to consider it with an open mind. If you pass this today, you will forever change the face of our community. So today, we're looking for some heroes who will not ignore the hundreds of neighborhood voices who are asking you to vote no to this inappropriate zoning request. This plan narrowly passed the Planning Commission and should never have made it this far because the applicant met many questions unanswered. They failed to fully address issues such as State Road 70 access, safety, property owner easement encroachment, Bullies Creek floodplain, wetland questions, noise and lighting issues, circus schedules, and more. Planning Commissioner DeLesline said he could hear it inside a $1 million condo at Riviera Dunes. They approved parking lot variances and opened the door to alcohol use on the property. This plan is before you again, and it remains an incompatible land use. First, it's important to provide some background about this historic area of Manatee County that is rapidly disappearing. This project is in the heart of Old Onico, the block between 15th Street East and US 301, an interstate connector and hurricane evacuation route. It's a major gateway into our county, and we need your help to preserve and enhance it. We have a long history in Manatee County. Onico was a nickname to represent one company, referencing the Reesner family's Royal Palm Nurseries. It was known as Manatee County's garden spot. There's a car wash going in there now. Onico also had many groves. They're all gone now. Thompson Groves produced the first pink grapefruit here in 1913, and Reesner's propagated it to the world. Beginning in the late 1800s, neighborhood students were educated at Onico Elementary, one of our county's oldest public schools, which remains a neighborhood anchor. We are a very diverse community and home to public and private schools and many churches of all denominations who operate youth programs. We have a post office, daycares, many professional office buildings, including a veterinarian, medical offices, and an engineering firm. Onico is home to one of the only privately owned homes built in 1908 that's on the National Register. Come on. Stuck. There we go. On either side of the busy 6-lane highway are quaint tree-lined streets and residences. Many are going to be highly impacted by this project. This aerial photograph puts it all in context so that you can see the geographical logistics of a proposed circus in our neighborhood relative to our churches, schools, and historic sites. Our family has lived on State Road 70 since '85, and we have many years mentoring youth in our community. My husband, Pat, is a Manatee County native, and we both just retired from years of service to the school district of Manatee County. Our sons attended Onico Elementary and Southeast. Both my sons and husband are Eagle Scouts, and all four of us served Scouting's Troop 10 for 17 years at Onico Methodist next door. In the 1980s, we worked with DOT, churches, and the school when the road was widened. We lobbied to keep the school slowdown zone and saw that school sidewalks were built. We've worked to preserve Onico's history, but sadly, we've also noticed its character disappearing. With this backdrop, we hope you will see value in helping us preserve and enhance it, not deplete it. There are many negative implications about this rezone application, and traffic is at the top of the list. FDOT estimates that 36,500 cars traverse this section each day. Crashes are common, and the frequency of EMS and fire safety equipment rushing to get to accidents light up the days and nights with siren and peak hour traffic noise is deafening. This circus will add increased traffic, noise, bright lighting, and will decrease property values. Who wants to live next to a circus? Circatalia's plans are to shoehorn an arena and a few buildings into a small parcel wrapped around an FDOT retention pond along State Road 70, voted among the most congested Manatee County roads. On the north side of the site is a heavily treed area that abuts a private residential road along Bullies Creek. The applicant calls it a stream, but it's a protected wetland that assists drainage, but the creek will also act as a conduit for circus noise. This application shows conflicting FEMA maps and does not fully address the flood concerns nor resident easement encroachment issues. This project is 750 feet from the congested intersection of 15th Street East by the railroad tracks. Trains can stop traffic and back it up at any time. Heavy intersection traffic makes it almost impossible to turn onto State Road 70 off side roads. Most surprising that at both hearings, the applicant is erroneously proposing 2 State Road 70 access points, but they were clearly told last October by FDOT officials the western access point would be denied. I have the meeting notes to submit to you for that. This would mean only one entry exit would be allowed, presenting additional safety implications in an emergency. Cars heading south on 15th Street and east on 70 will have to cross over 3 lanes of traffic to get into the 4th turn lane. To go east, cars will have to make a U-turn at the 15th Street light against opposing cars turning right to head east. Just west of the intersection, State Road 70 squeezes to 2 lanes with no center turn lane. This will increase crashes and accidents. A 400-seat circus arena operating up to 3 peak time events per day times 20 days is a very bad idea at this location. 15th Street is a nightmare, a major artery that has been neglected for years. 2 north-south lanes back up traffic for blocks at State Road 70. Heading north into Samoset, it's a treacherous road with deep, unbarricaded, water-filled ditches on either side. Before adding more hazards here, you should improve this road. But most troubling of all are the themes of the circus shows. They operate the R-rated paranormal and other unsavory shows, such as the new prison-themed Cirque Slammer. The applicant would neither confirm nor deny that R-rated shows would occur in our community. To us, this is the equivalent of putting an X-rated movie theater in our backyards. The shows feature adult language, sexual jokes, racy costumes, and lots of blood and gore. One of their performers stated, "It's not for the kids." Cirque Italia boasts they brought this dark entertainment from Europe and based it on the underworld. How does a permanent adult-only venue fit in with our neighborhood? This is the last thing we need as we work hard to lift our youth away from such darkness in a world that needs more hope and positive character development. It appears your planning staff had no zoning category for a circus, though they're calling it a performing arts theater since there are no animals. Well, Ringling Brothers just announced they're bringing back the greatest show on earth without animals. Do they call it a theater? No. Make no mistake, this is a circus in a loud 72-foot-tall, brightly lit tent sitting in a residential neighborhood. It is not a theater. This is not a compatible future land use. If we open this door, what's next in Anico? Cirque Italia kept the public in the dark, and the lack of transparency has created distrust in the process. They only notified 100 residents. Instead of a community meeting, they held a 30-minute virtual Zoom. We felt it was so important to let the community in on the secret that we paid for signs and a mailing to over 1,400 citizens. Recently, hundreds of neighbors have come together over this issue, and I thank them so much. I am presenting another 300 petitions today to add to the multitude of opposition input you've already received. Come on. Finally, our community wants to partner with you to create a historic Old Onico gateway and use TIF funding and median beautification program to restore our abandoned adopt-a-spot medians. Let's bring Old Onico back to life with appropriate development. Please vote no to this zoning. The current professional office residential should not be changed. A yes vote will set a dangerous, unknown precedent for the future of our community. We do not want an R-rated circus. You are the guardians of our county. We ask that you please help us maintain and enhance our history, not take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next is Bill Bailey. And just so people can, to help you all, if you want to start staging behind, because these are 3-minute speakers each, so they'll go a bit quicker. After Bill Bailey, we will have Stella Burnett and Barbara Jonke, could be. Anyway, so that'll be the next 3. Mr. Bailey, first and last name, county of residence. You'll have 3 minutes, please.
My name is Bill Bailey. I'm a resident of Manatee County. I'm the pastor of Happy Gospel Church.
And have you been sworn?
Yes, I have. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. As I mentioned, I'm the senior pastor of Happy Gospel Church. Our church is approximately 2 blocks east of the proposed site.
I rarely get into public policy. My job and our church's mission are to preach the gospel and prepare people for eternity, and I try to stay in my lane. But today's events prove that we must take a stand, and that's why I'm here today. The issues of traffic flow, proper egress and ingress, and adjoining residential property are obvious issues. Our church faces the same ingress and egress issues on Highway 70. Our building has about the same capacity as the proposed tent, and yet we do not have a corridor directly across Highway 70 to go east. So I'm very familiar of the traffic concerns that would be brought about if this proposal goes through. But what brings me here today is the possibility of an R-rated circus coming to our neighborhood. By its own admission, the Paranormal Circus is a horror show full of violence and gore. It features a demon-possessed barking dog boy, a female hanging upside down by her hair, blood, gore, and other filth. This is in their own advertisements. These are not my words. This is not what will benefit or help the redevelopment of Oniko. The property is within walking distance of several churches, not only Happy Gospel, my friends at Community Baptist, except when we're on the softball field, Oniko United Methodist Church, Iglesia Hispania Church, and also it actually almost connects to the First Baptist Church of Oniko property, which currently has a school as part of its property. Several schools and daycares are also within walking distance. I respect what the county attorney said earlier. However, every family, every youth group, every church, every synagogue, every boys and girls club, and others are having conversations right now about the violence in our culture that has helped create the horrible things that we've experienced here as a nation the last 2 or 3 weeks in Uvalde and in Buffalo. I'm not blind to our beautiful Oniko community, but I also know that it has many challenges. It's among one of the most challenged areas of our community. I've pastored here for over 3 decades. I know my community. This type of programming is not acceptable in Oniko. I recognize that you are not legislators of morality, but I'm asking you to make the decision to do what's right and vote no to bring in the circus to Oniko. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, sir. Stella Burnett, first and last name, county of residence. Tell us whether you've been sworn, and you'll have 3 minutes, ma'am.
My name is Stella Burnett, and yes, I've been sworn, and I'm in Manatee County. I'm looking at the agenda, and it's on page 20, and I commend you guys for 232 pages from this. I got through 100 of them. And we've already addressed when it's listed positive aspects, and at the bottom it says applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting, so we've already discussed what that was. The negative impacts, degree impacts of neighboring resident is a concern. Noise, light, traffic, safety. The access approval of the DOT is required once, I guess, to get to the final site plan. And then on the bottom again, it also addresses timing, compatibility, concerns with proposed medium-intensity recreational use adjacent to single-family residential use and zoning. There is a house, I mean, on your site, 16th Street East, there's a house that sits there. It's not a road, it's a private road that goes, I mean, if you tried to make a road, you would go through that person's house. It is like right beside this. I walked the whole area. I pulled up their your website, and he had 2 infractions already. He demoed the 12 by 20 foot shed, no utilities attached to the building. This is reference to CE 2002-0189. A citation was issued for doing the demo without a permit. He put up his fence without a permit. He did get some electrical, and I guess he must have had a permit because somebody else did that. His taxes on this recreational use piece of property has not been paid. He's got his 2021 on the business property that sits on that's been paid, but his 2020 is still delinquent and somebody else owns the certificate. On his website, he says he uses a stage holds 3,500 gallons of water. Hopefully, I don't know where that's coming from. But it's a residential area. Your theater, it's a mile up the road. It's surrounded by residential area. It just, I mean, it is. They try to sugarcoat it, but it's not. When they talk about the asphalt, that's a couple miles up the road. There is parking beside it. A roofer parks beside them. I don't know how they got their big trucks in and out of there, but I can see on a Google map that their big trucks were back there. I don't know how and I don't know how they're going to get all those cars back there and park in 128 spaces.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I'm opposed.
Next is Barbara Janke. It's Jahnke. Okay, and then taking a position behind her will be Pastor Phil Durstein, and after Pastor Phil will be Teresa Enloe, E-N-L-O-E. So if the two of you would like to stage yourselves behind Barbara. Ma'am, first and last name, your county of residence, whether or not you've been sworn, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Barbara Yonke. I'm Manatee County, and I have been sworn. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Barbara Yonke, and I live in Gulf Lakes Mobile Home Estates, which is on 9th and 53rd Avenue East. We're a 55 and older community. If you want a definition of old people, don't go there. You'll not find it. But we are very active, and we are very much sure that we're going to be negatively impacted if this goes, and we are against it. Now, I've lived in Manatee County for 35 years. I've seen a lot of changes. 9th Street was a 2-lane road. It had beautiful oak trees that canopied over the street and shaded it. It was beautiful. But they all came down when it was widened to 4 lanes, and that's okay. It wasn't okay at the time, but it's okay. We have 4 lanes, we have progress, and it was a positive thing. 53rd Avenue was widened to 6 lanes. A lot of changes with that. They were all positive for growth. You're aware, as I am, of all the changes that have been made, and growth has been positive. However, I can't find anything positive at all about having this community of Oneiko by allowing a paranormal circus to come into this area. How can a huge tent be crammed into the middle of an area surrounded by homes make progress? It's out of a family community and into a very dark place. Oneiko is a community with 5 churches, has Oneiko Elementary School, several private Christian schools, and it's a community that is multicultural. Some of these families in this area are struggling. Oneiko Elementary is a Title I school. These children need help. They need support. And the church, Oneiko United Methodist Church, the Salvation Army, is providing after-school work for them and help and mentoring. There's no way that this influence of this R-rated show that's in a tent in the middle of a residential area is very helpful to these children or these young adults, these young teenagers that are affected. And they're going to be affected. There's no way you can just look at that tent. It's scary. You saw it. Just seeing these children in this area, what kind of a difference will that make in their lives? These children are the future of Manatee County. The business you're considering is not a positive change. Commissioners, you are the guardians of Manatee County. You are responsible for what happens in the future. Please consider this change and help see how it won't serve for the families in Oneiko.
Thank you, ma'am.
Please vote no.
Thank you. Next is Pastor Phil from Christian Family Retreat. First and last name, your county of residence, and tell us whether you've been sworn. Sir, you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Phil Durstein. I have been sworn. I've been in Manatee County, a resident for 54 years. We've been operating.
Thank you for coming. No, I'm just start your time here.
We've been operating in East Manatee County on 110 acres PDMU as a church, a conference center, a Christian community. One of the things that we do out at Christian Retreat all summer long is we do weekly children's and youth camps. These are for children and for teenagers. They're 5-day, 5-night camps. We do over thousands of children and youth all summer long. You know, this circus is not for them because it is rated. It's R-rated. Something, curiously, that the applicant hasn't discussed. It's just been raised by all of us. I'd like to encourage this commission to really consider the good reputation that Manatee County has for family values. And we've embraced that for our parades and a lot of activities around here. We know that the compatibility issue for ONECO is there with the schools and the churches that are in this area as well. I'm going to recommend strongly denial of this application. I don't think it will be appropriate or helpful for Manatee County, and this application of circus is not the kind of circus that our children understand, and not something that's going to be helpful for Manatee County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next is Teresa Enlow. After Teresa, Mark Mueller and Lisa Price. If Mark and Lisa would take position behind Teresa. Ma'am?
I've been sworn in.
Yeah, first, last name, whether you've been sworn 3
Teresa
minutes.
Enlow, Manatee County.
There you go.
We just moved to the area this past year. I'm very impressed with my people here. You're very knowledgeable, and I appreciate that. My thing is that I would like to see this not happen because our children need mental health things going for them, not against them. Because if you're 14 years old, you don't have any really worldly experiences. You're just a kid. I remember being 14. My parents were really stupid. When I turned 21, I was like, for heaven's sakes, they are so smart. I didn't realize how intelligent they were. But my thing is to the safety and the crime rate that would happen with this being brought into our neighborhood, because we're getting lots of people coming in, and like this gentleman stated, he probably wouldn't have moved to this area if he knew that this was going to happen in this area, and I wouldn't have either. I would not have moved here. But I do love Florida. I love Bradenton. I think it's a wonderful city, and I'm really for the children. That's the whole thing here, is for the children. And thank you. And one thing I would really like to see happen is you get rid of the lizards. They are just, ew. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I would make an attorney joke, but I won't do that. I'll spare all the attorneys. Mark Mueller, sir, you're next. Lisa Price, and then Michelle Rieger will be after you. First and last name, your county of residence, whether or not you've been sworn, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak on this issue.
Yes, my name is Mark Mueller. I'm a resident of Manatee County for over 40 years, and I have been sworn. I'm not going to be redundant with a lot that's been said, although I fully agree with most of everything that's been said today. Staff has already struggled with hesitancy and compatibility, whether they can even state that or not. Indicated very clearly that the balance of their decision is based on this being a neighborhood issue, and as you can see, this is clearly a neighborhood issue. The Planning Commission could barely come to a positive vote to present this to y'all, and they serve as your technical advisors, and they themselves struggle to present this to you. You have the role of serving as our community leaders that look at much more than what you've even been presented today, and we ask that you be a true steward of the future, the vision of this county, and whether this is truly what you seek to be as part of your legacy in that stewardship. Commissioner Servia, you noted that you're a long-term, this morning, just yourself, you said you're a long-term thinker. I challenge you all to think considerably hard on this for the long term. You know, we've heard others speak already to just some of the issues that we've seen over the last few weeks. I would just ask you all, most everyone says, I wish there was something that I could do. There's something that I could do to help prevent some of what we see happening in the future. Today is your opportunity to take a concrete stand against the dark and the violent. And I would just ask that you deny this request.
Thank you, sir. Lisa Price.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Price, and I have been sworn in, and I'm a resident of Manatee County. When I moved here 5 years ago, I love the area, and I will continue to love the area and live and thrive in this area. One day when I was riding down, I forgot the name of the road, I saw the tents for the paranormal circus. I didn't ask any questions at the time, but I did inquire exactly what type of circus is this. And what I heard was very disturbing, and everything has already been said about what people have learned about it. But I want to ask this question because I'm not going to go over everything. How can this type of, whatever you want to call it, benefit our community? Will it uplift it? Will it encourage it? Will it enlighten it? What does it do for our community and our children? We want all of us the same thing, a safe, happy community. I'm a Christian, and this goes against everything that I believe in. We have those schools, we have churches, we have zone for other things, restaurants and other things like that. But to have this type of thing move in our community, I know it would not benefit it. So I'm just going to say the same thing I heard other people say and ask all of you to please think about this before you start voting. We live there. This is our community. And we don't want such things in there. We already have enough turmoil going on in this country right now. And I think that involving this would only make it worse. And as far as the traffic and everything else that goes with it, I agree on those terms as well. So I'm really asking you to vote your conscience, vote your heart, because it's not a good fit for our community. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Michael Rieger is next, followed by Jose. I'm not going to butcher your last name, Jose. Hopefully it starts with a P. Okay, you're the last.
My name is Michael Rieger. I have been sworn in. I live in Manatee. My neighbors and our captain has laid out everything better than I could ever. Mine is more of a personal thing. I live on that easement that they talk about. They sent out a letter. I don't Zoom, okay? They sent out a letter with the map that is not detailed at all. They have what looks like a crayon going down the easement. It goes through my front yard. That says that that's his property line. I have a survey in my pocket that shows that it's not. And they say that there's a 50-foot buffer between that point and Bowleys Creek. That 50-foot, I own 20 feet of that buffer. So if he's going from there's only another 15 feet maybe to the Bowleys Creek. And then you have to have your buffer. And there was one other thing from the last Planning Commission. When you guys were doing the agritourism, one of the commissioners happened to mention, oh, I did a lot of circus things back in the day, and I ran these, and it would be a conflict of interest. What do you think? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jose, first and last name, your county of residence. Tell us whether you've been sworn, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak on this issue.
Hi there, my name is Jose Peleado and I've been sworn. I live in Manatee County, adjacent to the project site. My front door, according to this map here, my front door is going to be right in front of the parking lot. Okay, I would say from here to that column. There's other neighbors that are going to be 35 to 50 feet away from the performance tent. And I cannot even begin to imagine all the noise, the sound, the traffic, the lights. I work for real estate investors, and the first thing they say is, that's going to devalue property prices, impact them negatively. But this is not just my issue. I mean, this is a thing that the whole community feels affected by it, because the question is this: is this the right fit for the community? Talking about environmental impacts, if you pull the picture where it shows all the trees, go back there today and see how many trees there are left. When they first moved in, they did a lot of tree cutting, uprooted a lot of the land, and all you got to do is just pull up the picture and go back there today. I think the impact has already been done for the back section of the parcel. And I don't think the community is really against change, but what type of change? I mean, what's the trade-off? There's a car wash being built on 70 by 301. I mean, there's businesses that want to participate with the community, exchanging goods and services. What kind of exchange do we get? They come in, they serve the community, and then go away. They're going to be shut down 95% of the time out of the year. That's pretty much all I have to say. The community pretty much already said a lot. It just does not create, it doesn't create harmony. The nature of the business, does not create the right harmony for the community. And I would say it's a bad idea. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's the last card that I have filled out for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience today who would like to come forward, though, to speak on this item, who has not filled out a card, but you would still like to come forward to speak? So, ma'am, when you reach the microphone, please state your first and your last name, your county of residence, and whether or not you've been sworn, and you have 3 minutes to speak on this item.
My name is Nicole Cook. I live in Manatee County. Was that what I needed to answer?
Have you been sworn?
Have you been sworn?
Yes, I have been sworn in.
Okay.
I'm much better at karaoke than things like this. I'm going to read from an email that I wrote to one of you. It's just going to be easier. I'm a new resident of the Oniko area, and what a surprise to learn what is being planted, a plan to possibly be going in my front yard. I am one of the ones that they spoke of earlier, where the west side easement goes right down the private drive. I'm over 5 months pregnant with our first child, and we have had definite ideas and dreams of what this private drive that we live on now would be like for years to come. These dreams did not consist of a horror-themed circus. Literally yards away from my front door. Aside from the noise and the lights that would inevitably be an issue, I can only imagine the late-night entry and exit of the crowd, yelling profanities, tossing their cigarette butts, alcohol bottles, and trash, more than likely feet from my doorstep. In addition to tearing down some of the beautiful trees, which I now learn that all of them won't be going down, and then I say, well, what a perfect place for underage drinking and drug use. Where the cardinals fly by and call their mate literally every morning and evening, I am in the unfortunate predicament where my private drive is a part of these people's agenda. I had no idea these plans were in action. The real estate agent and previous owners of this house, understandably, did not relay this information to us. And because we're new to the area of 2 months, the mail coming to us was not addressed to us either, so we were just recently informed. Would I have bought this house if we know these plans were in action? No. The answer is no. I don't think anyone in their right mind would. Nobody wants at their doorstep. Nobody wants this at their doorstep. There's plenty of areas, like in the Palmetto area, which honestly freaked me out every time we drove by. But I'm sensitive to things like this, personally. It is absolutely destructive to this neighborhood, as it would be to any neighborhood. This is a neighborhood. This isn't a commercialized Palmetto area. Then to add a horror satanic theme creates an even more destructive atmosphere. I've been put in a position to have no choice but to deal with this, and I and my husband will be very involved in doing whatever it takes from happening. This private drive has been here since these homes were built in the 1950s. I feel it's inhumane to now claim it 70 years later, bulldoze through it or whatever they plan on doing to it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to come forward to speak on this item? Yes, sir. First and last name, your county of residence, and tell us whether or not you've been sworn, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak on the item.
My name is Jacob Lopez, and I live in Sarasota County. I have not been sworn in.
Okay, we'll hold everything. We'll get that taken care of. Yep, well, so before you start, I'm going to have the clerk reset your clock because you're down to 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
That's fine, that's all I need.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it nice and short. I'm 24 years old. I was raised in Manatee County. I went to Onico Elementary School, Lee Middle School, Manatee High School. So I'm a product of this, this city. And I go to church at Happy Gospel Church. I've been there since I was 13 years old. It's not something we need in Onico or anything we really want in Onico. I've lived in Onico. I know it's a struggling area. If you don't or haven't lived in Onico, then it's really hard for you to really, speak on the hominess or where it hits home. It hits home for a lot of people. People that don't live there or haven't lived there don't know. Onico is unified. We try to be unified. We still strive for that unity. And I don't think a circus of this nature, a circus of this negativity is needed in our community. I'm a youth pastor at Happy Gospel. I work with middle school and high school students every single day, and it's nothing that they need. A lot of times in the news broadcast, you see young kids like we did recently that go into schools, shooting up grocery stores. That's my generation. It's my generation. We don't need this stuff. It's just toxic and really not needed or not wanted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. So well said. Anyone else would like to come forward to speak from the public on this item? All right, seeing no one, we're going to close public comment at this time, and we are going to move to closing comments by staff. Marshall?
Nothing further,
Okay,
Commissioner.
nothing further from staff, and then any final words from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been really interesting for me, this process and looking at this particular use. The temporary nature of it is something that is unique, and it really tends to hit people differently. We actually had an adjoining property owner who would back right up to the temporary rec use, who said he would prefer to have the circus for 40 days than to have multifamily or some other type of residential in the backyard. So I think it really just depends on the way that you look at it. But that being said, I am hearing what the comments of the board are, and so at this time we would like to request a continuance to be re-advertised. We'll go back to the drawing board and relook at what we've got proposed, at least from what I'm hearing on the rear portion of the site, at least.
Okay. Shrewd move, sir. I had a feeling that was coming.
He did his lawyer thing.
He did his,
Exactly. It's a lawyer
yes,
thing.
he did his lawyer thing. Commissioners and members of the public, since we do not have a full board present, the applicant is entitled to a full board for a vote.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we changed
Go ahead,
our
ma'am.
rules. There's no automatic entitlement.
Oh, okay.
You
We have
didn't
to grant
ask
it.
for it if you want it. You
Gotcha.
didn't ask for it.
So,
We went through.
Ms. Shank, before we proceed any further then, would you read a proposed motion for a continuance, and then we will see if any board member would entertain making the motion?
It would be based upon the request for the applicant for a continuance. I move to continue the public hearing and re-advertise on proposed ordinance PDMU 2115ZG to no date certain, re-advertise. I think we have the balls in the applicant's court. It may have to go back to planning commission.
So moved.
So,
Okay, so we do have a motion for a continuance by Commissioner Servia, and we have a second by Commissioner Bellamy. Now, the order of the board is Servia, Satcher, Cruz, Baugh. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the board. I'm sure the discussion now goes to the issue of the continuance, I would imagine. But Commissioner Servia, you're first on the board.
Thank you. I believe we can still discuss the application to give the applicant feedback as they continue to refine.
Well,
Is that accurate?
my opinion, the board should not discuss the merits of the application. The applicant controls the game right now, and they've asked for continuance. They're going to revise their plans in some respect. They may have to go back to planning commission, new staff report. We don't need to muddy the record. I recommend you not comment on the merits of the application at this point. Vote on the procedural motion. That fails, then you got to vote on the substance of the project.
Okay, so I'll hold my comments until the next hearing. And to the woman who doesn't like lizards, I will say to you, they eat palmetto bugs, so they're a good thing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Satcher, would you like to make any comments on the continuance?
I'll hold off, but if it fails, I would like to stay on the board for discussing the merits of the actual application.
Okay, if it fails, I suggest you have a itchy trigger finger and get yourself back on the board quickly then. Commissioner Cruz, comments on the continuance.
Yeah, I personally don't see the point of the continuance because I think whatever has to come back is so substantially different that they can just reapply with a substantially different. Probably, I think we've discussed this ad nauseum, and if it's a continuance just solely because it's a counting of votes, then whatever they come back with next time around is going to be so different that I think it makes sense because this has been going on long enough to give direction from this board of an approval or denial at this point in time, and they could always come back with a revised site plan or wherever if it in fact fails. I don't understand the purpose of a continuance this late in the game. I mean, it's not like, oh, wait, now there's somebody missing from this board. Someone's been missing from this board the entirety of the day. They knew someone was missing from the board. I mean, people can always reapply with different site plans and different business plans at a later date.
Commissioner Baugh, do you have comments on the continuance?
My comments actually were going to be exactly what Commissioner Cruz just said, so.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Servia, you're next on the board.
So my comments on the continuance are this. The reason that I like it is I think the applicant has heard what this board likes about the application, which is the stuff along State Road 70, and what they don't like. So I'm not in favor of charging applicants additional fees, taking up additional staff time to reapply and go through this all over again when maybe they're going to bring us back something that this entire crowd can support. So that's the reason that I want a continuance. But I think that the applicant is probably pretty clear that without a major adjustment, they're not going to get support. So that's how I see it. That's why I support the continuance.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I am going to weigh in on the continuance myself and say that I am not going to vote in favor of the continuance. I'm prepared to vote on the agenda item today and move forward with that vote. Commissioner Satcher, you're on the board, sir. Okay, he's off the board. He's waiting until the continuance vote has been held.
I'm going right after Satcher, too.
Okay. And we have held, to be clear, we have held public comment on this, and this is a procedural motion anyway. Ms. Shank, is that correct? So I am ready to move forward with the vote. We're going to hold a roll call vote for those of you who are not familiar with this. Sir.
Mr. Chair.
sir.
We are voting on the continuance.
This is on the
only.
continuance only.
And can I speak?
You're on the board, yes.
Right. I'm in the position if the board does not want to move forward of the continuance, based on the request of the applicant, I'm with you. Let's make a vote and whether approve or deny it, and we can go from there.
Well, we're about to hold that vote now.
Right. Okay. All right. And
You could also withdraw your second, sir.
I'll withdraw the motion if that's the pleasure of the board.
Right.
Excuse me, we have to, let's be
Ms.
careful
Shank?
here. We have procedural due process rights
Let's
of
take
the
the vote.
applicant. We have to vote on their request.
Okay,
first.
we'll move forward with the vote on the request then. So we're going to hold a roll call vote. We're going to start with District 2.
what are we voting on?
We are voting on the continuance, whether or not you'd like to grant a continuance or not.
So you're telling me I can't remove my second?
She thinks procedurally, because it's quasi-judicial, he's made the request.
Well, that makes
should
it
vote
look
on the
bad
request.
for me if I vote no on something I put a motion on. I thought we were going to just move forward.
That's an internal decision that you have to make, sir.
I struggle with internal decisions every day, Chairman.
That's right.
You can make a second just for discussion purposes.
Right,
True.
right,
You're not
okay.
required to vote.
Okay, so I vote no.
So District 2 votes no. District 3 votes no. District 4
Yes.
is a yes. District 5 is a no. District 6 is absent. District 7 is a no. District 1 is a no. Madam Clerk, the request for the continuance fails by a vote of 6-1. We're going to, so 5-1, I apologize, that's habit. I'm used to having a 7-person board. 5-1 with Commissioner Whitmore absent. We'll now move to deliberation. The order of the board is Satcher, Cruz, Servia. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
I have a question.
Consideration. Going to the merits of the application, some compelling cases based on, presentations past presentations from the applicant. I don't know if that's necessarily our role to comment on that one way or the other. I don't like it when that goes against me, I'll say that. When someone disagrees with what I want to do or say, I don't like it being used against me to take away that right to say those things. But we deal with, some of you, this may be the most, the first time you're here, we deal with cases of people that are upset about something that's happening close to them all the time. And our answer a lot of times is, but it's very consistent with what's going on, even though you may not like how many homes. You can't debate, that this is where people are living, residential. But this is different. This is a rezone that they're requesting. It has to be rezoned. So the people that bought in this area, the lady that came down that bought here recently, we can't say, well, you should have known it was coming, because this was literally zoned. This was not contained in the zoning, and we're having to change definitions of words even to fit it in as it is. So I don't think this is appropriate, and I don't think it fits with the community. And based on that, upon the staff report, evidence presented, comments made at the public hearing, the action of the Planning Commission in finding the request to be inconsistent with the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan and the Manatee County Land Development Code, that's conditioned herein, I move to deny Manatee County zoning ordinance PDMU 21-15ZG, deny the general development plan, deny the findings for specific approval, and deny specific approvals for an alternative to Land Development Code Sections 1, 7013A, 2, waive the landscaping requirement exceeding 1,000 square feet, at all, waive requirements for each parking space, vertical markers. Do y'all want me to read every
We get the
single word?
point. I mean, it's the
I have to read every
motion.
single word?
Commissioner Satcher, I'll
start
second that for
I'll
discussion.
second it too.
He finished?
Okay, hold on. Please let Commissioner
Actually,
Satcher finish.
you probably wait till the end.
Oh, boy.
So I move to deny and to provide for the applicant that should a new application be done within the next 6 months that they are trying to get approved, that any fees regarding that would be waived. If they
We-
bring us a
Can't
different-
do, I don't think you can
Why
waive
don't we
the
Can I
fees.
do that, Sarah?
No, we have
Nope.
to separate
Okay.
the
Correct.
motions and
So,
That's separate.
You can only make a motion for
I have to add a
denial.
little bit to your motion when you're done.
You have to add to that?
go ahead, you want to
well,
add now?
Read everything for denial
Everything that
right
you said,
there.
and then I direct the county attorney and staff to bring back the written findings for denial at your next available land use meeting, which is June 16th, in the form of a
Second.
resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Satcher for denial with the added language from Ms. Shank, and a second by Commissioner Bellamy. The order of the board is Cruz, Servia, and Bellamy. Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and people understand where I'm coming from. I agree with the motion for denial, and I'm going to vote for the motion for denial, but it's because of the compatibility of what they're trying to do here, especially on the back part. All of the conversation here so far has been very limited in scope relative to traffic and real compatibility of usage. That's where the conversation should have went. I think it would have been denied based on that level of compatibility in itself, just hearing people talk. I'm not going to get into what they're doing in this tent. I know you all want to, and that's what got you all here, and that whatever gets everybody engaged is fine, but I don't need the ACLU coming after me saying that I'm fighting someone's First Amendment rights. I mean, like I said, the AMC is 0.6 miles from the Happy Gospel Church. I just looked it up. There's 17 different movies showing there. 7 of them, over 40% of the movies there are rated R right now. I'm not going to start dictating what movies can be shown at the AMC, and this is a show that has people that have attractions. We don't have blue laws in Manatee County. There are age restrictions associated with this. I am not voting no because of the content of this show. I'm voting no because I do not think this show is compatible. Any show is compatible, because if you all disagree, then I'd hate to see what happens when they come back and promise they're going to put on a regular theater or a circus that's not paranormal and is rated PG. I want to see how many of you support that at that point in time, because it no longer is an R-rated show. I still think you're going to not want a big tent showing up 40 days out of the year, because that's the issue that should be on the table right here. Because if they come back and say, I'm going to take the paranormal out, they do other shows, I'm going to show a Wiggles concert for 40 days out of the year, you're not going to like that either, and you're all going to show up here and start talking about traffic and compatibility and noise, and that's where the conversation should have went. So, I support the denial, but I disagree with the fundamental premise that the denial is based upon a content of a show and not incompatibility of the overall usage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Servia and then Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, thank you. And if the staff could put up the zoning map, or somebody could put up the zoning map, so I can give you a few of my comments.
Excuse me.
yeah,
I have
we're in
concerns.
deliberation.
We gotta be careful with this.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So I want to start by saying thank you for the presentation on both sides. The people who made the presentation on behalf of the applicant, that's the A-team right there. They did a good job, but this is not the right project. That's the problem. So I'm a First Amendment advocate. What Commissioner Cruz said is right. We can't legislate what goes on inside that tent. I'm also a Christian, and personally, I've got problems with some of this stuff, but that's not our job. So the reason that I have a problem with this is, I'm glad the attorney talked to us about the Burt Harris Act, because once something is approved here, it's very hard to undo it these days, because those rights continue. So that was an important factor. Rezoning this property to PDMU is intrusive to the neighborhood. It's incompatible with the neighborhood. I think a lot of people who favor it were leaning on the fact that it's only 40 days. But 40 days of incompatibility is 40 days too many. I mean, if we were going to put up something permanently here, I think we may have heard different comments, because people would say, of course it's not compatible. There's people living all around it. So just because it was temporary doesn't make it compatible. Even our staff stood up here and said, I'm not going to tell you it's compatible. That was a big red flag to me. The height analysis should have been done at this stage. I'm sorry it wasn't, because that was important information, and that's part of the incompatibility. the depth of the corridor. And the reason I wanted you to look at the zoning map is the depth of the corridor, we keep that commercial pretty tight to State Road 70. To take it north into the neighborhood, that's where it's intrusive. We're spending a lot of money in the Southwest TIF trying to revitalize neighborhoods. And this is like, we're blowing up a balloon, if you'll imagine. And with this type of an application, you're piercing that balloon, all the effort that we've done, because it's just out of scope, it's out of character. So that is why I don't support this project. I did support the continuance, because now the applicant can't come back, I think, for another year. And, it's just, we would have gotten some redevelopment at State Road 70. We could have, that would have been very good. And we're not going to be able to get that now. So those are the reasons why I supported taking a break and moving forward with a new application. But we're not there, so I'm going to support the denial. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Ma'am.
I just want to clarify. There is a one-year waiting period to file another rezoning unless they demonstrate they're substantially modifying their application. So I just want to clarify that.
Commissioner Baugh.
Well, I think, it's plain to say that we've heard the other comments from commissioners, and the bottom line is that this usage is not compatible to that area. I mean, it doesn't matter. That's the bottom line. It's not compatible. So I'm glad that we're taking care of this today. I don't want the neighbors, it's all about, we are supposed to protect the quality of life of our citizens. That's really the bottom line. That's what it's all about. So obviously, a circus or anything like that in this area is just not compatible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. No one else is on the board. We have held public comment. I'll simply welcome Mayor Brown to the audience, and then we'll move on with the vote. This will be another roll call vote. It just happens that I'm first in the rotation this time. District 3 votes no. District 4.
So the motion is for denial.
Correct.
So in voting yes, we're supporting the denial motion.
Oh, I
Is that
apologize.
correct?
You're correct. I would like to reconsider my vote. Thank you, Commissioner Servia. Thank you, Commissioner Servia. District 3 votes yes. District 4.
I'm a yes.
Is a yes. District 5 is a yes. District 6 is absent. District 7. Yes. District 1.
Yes.
District 2.
Yes.
Madam Clerk, the motion passes for denial unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Okay. We'll move on then to item number 8, wrap this up, and we'll head to lunch. Madam County Attorney, so as you exit the room, please do so quietly. The meeting is not adjourned. We're moving on to item 8.
This is a proposed resolution R-22094, denying application number PDR 2107ZG to rezone approximately 42 acres, generally located at the southwest corner of Twin Rivers Trail and Mulholland Road, AKA 2401 Twin Rivers Trail, Parish, from the NCO General Agriculture, formerly NCO Overlay District, to the PDR Plan Development Residential Zone District, and denying approval of General Development Plan and overlay requests for specific approvals for 126 single-family detached residential units and a 5,000 square foot residential support use facility. This is not an advertised public hearing, but we're required to allow public comment on the written findings of fact, conclusions of law to support denial of the applications. And the actual requested is I move to adopt Resolution 22094 to deny application PDR 2107ZG.
Is anyone going to say so moved?
So move.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bellamy and a second by Commissioner Satcher.
Oh, I remember, you did disagree.
Yeah.
We will open this up to public comment as required. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on this specific item? All right, seeing no one, we'll go to the phone then. Anyone on the phone who's called in on number 8?
No, sir.
Okay. I do have 2 cards here, even though no one came forward. For number 8 is Franca Passo or Robert Phelan. Are either of you in the chamber? Okay. Not seeing them. We will then close public comment. There are no commissioners on the board for deliberation. Commissioner Cruz is on the board. Sir?
Usually when this comes up, it's a little more straightforward because it was more universal, what would be the deliberation here? Isn't this kind of just administrative? I mean, I fundamentally disagree with it. I voted in favor of this in the first place, but is there really much of a deliberation? All we're doing is kind of memorializing a previous vote, right?
I'm simply giving
We're
you an
not
opportunity.
rehashing it
I'm
from
just
scratch.
giving you an opportunity
Understood.
to speak.
No,
if you'd like to
I'm
speak,
sorry.
sir.
I was asking more the attorney just because it's my
That's
first time
correct.
where it comes back where I voted the other way.
Illegally, we're required to bring back the findings in writing.
All right, so this is
under
more
state statute.
administrative.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no one else on the board, let's not do the roll call, let's just hold the vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? So, Madam Clerk, it passes by a vote of 5-1 with Commissioner Cruz in opposition. Commissioners, that concludes our agenda today. Is there any further business? All right, we're adjourned.